Town of Monroe Planning Board Workshop meeting. Noreen, would you please do the roll call?
Anthony Vaccaro.
Here.
Lisa McQuaid.
Here.
Bonnie Franson.
Here.
Jason Swinsky is absent. Jeff Manson.
Here.
John Allegro is absent. And Pat Shea.
Here.
All right, with that, we have a quorum and we can conduct business. Next item on the agenda, I'd like to point out the fire exits. There are two in front of me, one to the left, one to the right. There is the exit entrance through which everybody arrived, and then there's another back in this direction out into the patio. With that, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. All right. First item on the agenda is Dominic Santiago. If you would come forward, whoever's representing Mr. Santiago. Good evening. If you want to state your name for the record and Mike, you need to turn on. That's Oz speaking to you.
That would see that board. I'm good at changing
Yes, George.
batteries, but not turning the on-off switch. So, well, it's good to see everybody. It's been a while.
Yes.
It's good. Hope everyone's well. So we're here to present, and also I want to thank the board for giving us the courtesy of presenting tonight. As opposed to next week. So we thank you for that.
Thank you for being able to stop. We appreciate it.
So we're here to present a new project on 339 Route 17M. It's an existing lot, of course, and it has two buildings on it, two residential house structures. The owner would like to remove those structures and put up a mixed-use building with retail on the first floor and apartments or rentals on the second floor. We provided the existing conditions plan that was provided to us by a surveyor that shows all the conditions. The site definitely slopes towards Route 17M. It shows a drainage swale coming across one side. We in our proposed design, we are using the existing curb cut or existing opening from the property that exists already on the property into the site. And we provided two options, one that favors parking more towards the front and another favors parking more towards the side and the back. We tried to show, on option number two, we tried to show a more of a divided parking more in the back for the apartments, and parking along the side and the front for the retail spaces. Again, we did just show preliminary designs. We'd like to get the board's feedback. I have not had an opportunity to read the comments yet, but just received them, but we're here to welcome those comments and to get some feedback from the board on how to proceed. To the extent we feel that everything we presented complies with the bulk table requirements for a GB zone as far as the setbacks and lot area coverage and the height restrictions associated with the buildings. There is existing municipal water and sewer on site. hopefully, it'd be our intent to connect to that. Of course, there might be upgrades regarding the sewer connection, but, we're prepared to address that as the design process goes on.
I think so. With that, we'll start first with our engineer and then our attorney in terms of any comments they may have.
Sure. I note that this is, conceptual in nature, this plan, but I just wanted to run through a couple major things. The bulk table, you're missing the lot width for that, so that'll have to be added. Regarding the EAF, there's a couple things that were unanswered. One bigger thing that you had answered yes to was that there's public water available. I'm not aware of any town water districts that that could supply water or are in the vicinity, but I didn't know if you had proposed another way of providing water to the site.
That's probably a misprint on our part.
Okay, so you're going to do an on-site well?
Well, actually, there is municipal water on site. It's feeding the two buildings.
Served by the village of Harriman?
I think if it was Harriman, it would probably be some kind of
Commercial public.
out-of-district user.
It's definitely
user?
commercial public water supply. We found no wells on the site.
So I think that's got to be addressed on how water is going to be handled, so.
Because you actually show a well on the site next to the building, next to the two-story frame building.
Yeah, but that's not in operation, I think. Well, we'll further research that and get to it.
So like you may have to clear for the firm how, at
Sure.
reservation. For all the setbacks for the building envelope, if you can identify what distances you're using for the setbacks? Just noted on the plan, I mean.
Sure.
And then there's a proposed retaining wall in the rear of the property. If you
Yes.
could note the, top of wall and bottom of wall elevations once a grading plan is finalized. Regarding the residential use on the second floor, I didn't see where that was permitted in the bulk table or in the code, so if you could just find where that is allowable per the code?
Well, that's something I wanted to talk about with the board. I mean, so it would probably be an accessory use because it is a GB zone, so the main use is commercial, it's general business. I didn't bring
Don't know
the
if-
accessory uses with me.
I don't believe that it is an accessory use. Maybe Ashley knows or remembers.
Yeah, I couldn't find anything either. Couldn't find anything either in the code that says it's permissible, and I think that's how you listed it when you have the bulk table, you say it's a permissible use, so I didn't know if there was something we were missing. I did speak with the building inspector a little bit. He wasn't aware of anything either.
Okay.
So that's a kind of that threshold issue there.
Okay.
I wasn't sure because you had noted, existing residential on the property, if you were going for some type of expanded, non-conforming use, which might have to get the ZBA involved.
That's a thought. I mean, there are two existing residential structures on the site. It has it's being currently used. It is something that maybe we would like to think about. I could talk about with the owner further about going to the ZBA and seeing if we can extend that to a portion of this project.
I think it'll be a question because you're demolishing a building and
Right.
then reinstituting the uses, so they'll have to decide whether that's even, something that can transfer over, or whether it's a use variance. But they would make that
I
determination.
think, and there's provisions in the code, it's 5758B, and that refers you to 5765. So it deals with whether you could reconstruct, in certain circumstances, if you could reconstruct an existing legal, pre-existing, non-conforming use. But there's restrictions as far as expanding it and the value of the reconstruction or the enlargement, and there's certain thresholds in there. So if you take a look at those and see whether that's something that's applicable, or the use variance, which is a, different standard than the
Sure.
area.
Sure.
And I guess that depends on, sometimes, I don't know if our regulations say that's in the event of, a fire or something that causes damage, that they can reconstruct it versus just being able to reconstruct. What section was that, Ashley?
758.
Yeah.
That would require, if they were to do it, it would require that they go to the ZBA.
Yeah.
At that section, though, too, it does say that it would be changed to a non-conforming use. So there might have been another one I was referring to, but I think it definitely is going to require some, perhaps determination by the building inspector and/or, ZBA application.
Yeah, I did discuss this with the owner. I did discuss this with the owner. I think the concept warrants some further review or from some further design effort. I think this type of mixed-use building would be well-suited for that area. And we definitely wanted to get the planning board's viewpoint before we proceed. That's why we just decided to submit a preliminary design.
Probably the way to do it would be to fill out, there's those land use determination forms that you could then submit to the building inspector and see, what your options are there, whether there is, because there's no even, I don't think there's a mixed use definition in the
There
town
isn't.
code, so
There
it really
isn't.
doesn't contemplate that, that type of use.
You see, this is great information. So if we decided to go that route, our trigger to go to the ZBA would come from or back to the planning board would come from a land use determination from the building department.
I think you'd first go to the building inspector, and then whether he gives, whatever his determination is, if you then appeal that to the ZBA, or go for a use variance if needed, or some other
Sure.
type of variance.
That's fine.
But I think it really depends on what's there, currently. You said they're both residential structures there currently?
Yes,
Are they single-family homes?
yes.
I think as much detail as you'd be able to give the building inspector in order to make that type of
That's fine.
determination, the size, size of whatever's residential currently versus what would be residential under the new plan, because that would deal with if you're enlarging the use and that type of thing. So,
I agree.
Okay.
We would provide as much information as we can in the land use determination form and send it to him and see, get a determination.
5760, that type of thing. I don't know whether this would fall under any of those. 5765C, I was just reading 65C2. Down into the weeds.
Right, we were looking at that. And again, that's often something that, especially when there's been damage, a fire, et cetera,
Sure.
and they need to reconstruct, you're allowed to reconstruct up to a point, but otherwise then you're expected to convert to a conforming use, especially if it's basically entirely damaged.
So then only other procedural items, applicants narrow the curb cut, if you will, on 17M. Right now, it's paved basically practically lot line to lot line along the frontage on 17M. So he's looking to close that in. That will require referral to DOT, you know, and eventually a highway work permit if, you know, if granted. And then, you know, typically the asks that referral so that all the correspondence is through the planning board. Secondly, since it's on 17M, at some point it'll have to be referred to county planning. And then, Ashley.
Thank you, Sean. Ashley, what are your comments?
I think most of them were touched on already. As far as seeker, it would likely be an unlisted action, but we'd have to wait until whatever actual proposal is going to be submitted to make that determination. A public hearing would probably be discretionary versus required, but if there were to be a public hearing, you are within 500 feet, I believe, of both the Village of Monroe and Harriman, so they would have to get notice of that. One of the things, as far as the owner, the Orange County Parcel Viewer, when I had looked it up, was showing a different corporation, a holding, 12-17M Holding Corp., so I don't know if it was recently sold or...
Actually, the transference or the contract signing and sale happened last month.
Okay, so if you
That's
could
why
then
we'd-
submit, if they're now the owner, if you could
Yeah, now
submit a
the-
copy of the recorded deed, that way,
Sure.
just because the county's often slow with updating their records, so I don't know when they'll have that
Okay.
information in their system.
So you want a copy of the deed?
Yes.
Not a problem.
And we also need, or did we have the owner consent affidavit that he can represent the LLC?
That,
Because it says Dominic Santiago, and then,
I believe it said his role, and I thought he was mentioned as his role in the LLC, but I could be.
it says 339 State Route 17 LLC is the landowner. Applicant's name Dominic Santiago for 339 State Route 17 LLC.
I thought there was in there
We provided an owner.
that he had signed identifying that he was a managing member, I believe.
And he signed all the documents, but I don't know if we need anything that shows that he's a partner or,
Yeah, he
Was your
signed that
form-
affidavit saying that he's the managing member of the LLC. And that's typically what is on the application, the owner's endorsement.
so we don't need anything as far as showing further proof of the LLC.
I believe you just have that owner's endorsement.
Okay.
Ultimately, the board will have architectural review, so you'll have to submit all those details. I know Sean had mentioned the trees within the limits of disturbance. You'll need the tree plan and all of that, one-to-one replacement or fee in lieu. And bulk table, it wasn't clear, I just wanted to make sure that it subtracts all those environmental considerations. It's the net lot area.
Yes.
And because there would be potentially new residential units, the board would have to discuss the recreation needs and whether there's a need for recreation fees under the law. But the threshold issue is really the use and whether, that's permitted or what type of ZBA relief might be required to get it permitted.
Those your comments, Ashley? Okay, thank you. Board members? Jeff, you want to start?
Sure. David, in your transmittal letter, you mentioned, we're proposing to remove the existing structures, and then in parentheses, which impact the existing zoning code negatively. Could you speak to that?
Sure,
What you're talking about there?
Sure, the buildings situated right now are in contradiction with the zoning code, so they are too close to the road, so they're within the front yard setback, and believe 2 structures on a site also is not consistent with the current zoning code.
I don't know how you're referring to the two different designs, option 1, option 2. I guess the one on there's one that's rectangular and then one that's like rectangular with a clipped corner.
Sure.
Can you give us the pros and cons of those two designs
Absolutely.
from your perspective and the property owner's, desire in relation to that?
Absolutely, I appreciate that. On option 1, you'll see a single bank of parking along the front, parallel to Route 17M, and then you also see a single row of parking on the west, and then also along the south. So basically, in this design, the parking wraps the whole site with the building in the middle. Option number 2 shows 2 rows of parking in the front, which I think is a good use of that space, with 1 single row along the west side. And then in the back, we kind of clustered that parking together if this were to go ahead to service any residential units on the 2nd floor. So we have there like a total of 11 parking spaces to account for 4 units, and then plus guests or 2 cars per unit or whatever extra might be needed. Just think it works well because the site slopes from the back to the front, so it slopes down towards 17M. This creates a natural entrance to the 2nd floor in the back, and that's something that we would try to develop further.
Looks like from the designs in the first option, though, it just appears that there's a little bit more green space preserved, particularly in the front of the building.
Yes.
Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Any idea, so your thought is retail on floor 1, apartments on floor 2. Any thought on the number of retail spaces, the number of apartments?
Well, at an 80-foot length, probably 4 units of retail on the 1st floor, probably 4 units of apartments on the 2nd floor. Because I believe the town does have a minimum area requirement for apartments, and so we obviously would plan to meet that threshold.
You. Anthony, do you have comments?
No, I didn't get a copy of the digital files, and I didn't know that this was going to be on tonight, so I don't have any comments.
Provide digital? Okay. Okay. Oh, yeah, I think I have the files. So, that's right.
Well, I reserve my.
Okay. Lisa, do you have comments?
Yes, I'm just trying to figure out where this is located. Okay,
So, you know where the chiropractor is on 17M across from Loyal Tire Auto Center? See this building here?
like it's heading Outerman Road towards like
So it's
Harriman?
it's this building. It's the white building
Oh, okay.
and the sewing machine, Hudson Valley.
Okay.
And then this is the law office, and then you're heading toward Quick Check in that direction.
Both buildings are going to be demolished?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Different building, you said.
Well, it was tailoring, but then I think, I'm not sure if Dominic Santiago had been in front of us before for something else. Was he the car guy, or no, that's someone else? Okay, so Dominic, I think someone had their car business here, and then they wanted to move to this building. Didn't we have like a pre-app about that?
He was in the upper building, and he was trying to expand to the lower building.
Okay,
They have not come back.
because I think he changed the sign over here, if I recall. Where they were showing a sign that they were going to put up, but that car establishment was somehow associated with this property.
So,
The
yeah,
car establishment was in the top building. He's still there, as far as I know.
Top building meaning this top white building?
No,
Now
that one
he's
there.
moved over to the
Yep,
brown building.
Well, that's where he's been.
Okay,
He wanted to move to the other one as well, and he had put the sign up saying that his wife or significant other owned part of that property. I don't know about, that's what they had said in our meeting.
okay,
But then they have yet to come back with anything since the last meeting.
okay.
Well, at one
And
point,
I
he was.
think I had spoke to the building inspector. I think they decided to not go forward with the changes. They were no longer going to have the cars on the property.
Okay.
So they're not going to,
So did they withdraw their application? I don't know
they
that
never
ever
had
did.
a,
That didn't happen.
it was just a pre
That was a pre-app? Okay. So Lisa, does that give you a good orientation?
Yes, thank you.
Do you have comments at this point, or?
No, I was just interested in figuring out where it was, and I was looking at
Okay.
the plans, but I don't have any questions right now.
Pat, do you-
One quick comment on that, because it sounds like that one structure isn't residential, so
my
any
mistake.
non-conforming status, at least that maybe was there previously, has likely been abandoned. So if you could just make sure you confirm whatever the uses are.
Absolutely.
Pat, do you have comments?
I know the property well. On the left side there, the big building is the old state trooper barracks. I mentioned that. Right side is my grandmother's house. So I spent a lot of time in the area. I forget the guy that used to own that two-story house. The structure in front was a tailor that was there for,
Yeah, and you
Quite
can
a
see
few
the
years.
sign here.
yeah. So that's about all I have, just a little perspective.
Thank you.
Historical perspective.
So, right now, I think my primary comment is the use. That's, from my perspective, it's not allowed and it wasn't intended there. So just going through the EAF, item number 3, and to some extent Sean may have covered this, but total acreage of the site and disturbance isn't filled out.
Sure.
On the top of the next page, page 2 of 3, permitted use under the zoning regulations, no. And consistent with the adopted comp plan, no. I just pulled up the comp plan here, and it talks about the general business district. And it says, residential uses would not be allowed in the district to also further the town's economic development goals. So it's specifically, it was not intended for residential use. Whether you're going to connect to an existing public or private water supply, I think that's a question mark, because you do show both a well and a well shed, and yet you're right, when you look at the inventory, it says water supply, so it's confusing. And it appears that you have wastewater utilities. I don't know if you're connected to them, but, because it's an old building, so I don't know if they're actually connected, and if there's septic there, that would have to be removed, or if you're actually connected. And I'm sure some utility bills would prove that out. With regard to archaeology or to historic resources, I would kind of want to get a sense of what the story is with that building, because you're proposing to demolish it. It is an older building, so if we could get just some background data on the building to the rear, not necessarily the Taylor building. That looks like it's more possibly modern. I was trying to find out the stream classification. Did you have that in your comments?
So I looked into that. I think the stream label is misleading because it doesn't show up on Environmental Resource Mapper
Okay.
at all. So I believe it's more of a swale, so.
So I think there's this lake, wait, where are we now? I
That's
just
it.
want to, is this the lake here? And then it comes down this way?
Right where your cursor is with the
Oh,
two
and,
buildings.
and Snoop is the building,
Yep,
Snoop Street, okay. So I think that's an outlet from this lake.
right.
And I can tell you that the last storm we had, it like blows out everything there. So I forget which hurricane or which, but there's like gravel, dirt, everything must hit a culvert by 17M. It gets backed up and it becomes a big mess over there. And I don't know if it's been improved at all. Or if it was taken care of, but we definitely need to see what the story is with that outlet. Because I don't think the lake has the capacity to handle when there's a big outflow, and like I said, it just seems to be a problem every time there's a major storm.
Yeah, they are looking to close that ditch in, if you will, with
Yes.
pipe, so they haven't shown any inverts or anything like that. There's really no design on that, so I asked them to confirm that, so.
And then anything that is going to be done would have to be coordinated with New York State DOT, of
Yes.
course. So those are really my comments with regard to the 4 units. I do have a question about how many bedrooms, because then that speaks to how many parking spaces we would need for that versus the retail. But I think there's a bigger issue of whether this is even allowed. And so I think before we go even further, it needs to get resolved between the building inspector and his determinations, and then if you have to go off to the ZBA.
You know what, we agree, and we understand that precarious situation. So we're definitely looking for comments from the planning board, just to get your initial reaction. And this is something I look forward to sharing with the owner and see which direction we'll go.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Anything else, David, or you're good for today? That was a lot, I guess.
I've had my share. Bobby.
Okay.
I'm good for today. And thank you again for this consideration. I'm glad Noreen contacted us regarding tonight, so thank you.
Great, thank you. Next item on the agenda is Joel Stossel.
No, Richmond's here. I don't know whether they want to go first. You're on both projects.
I will say that I might need to leave in the middle of the next one, so.
Okay.
I think this is a fast thing. We can make it, there's nothing too much to discuss about it, so. So good evening. My name is Joel Mann, on behalf of the applicant. I actually received today some comments from Ashley. I'm not sure if my office responded back in email, but I have hard copies addressing your comments, and I can hand that out to everyone. I don't know how I should do
They
it.
did.
What, they did?
Yeah, I
They
did
did
receive
email
it.
that? So do you
Is
have
it-
a chance to review that? Is that,
I had a couple more comments on that, but most of the stuff I think that I had requested was added. I know Sean had some comments as well. I don't know if you had got those yet. There's kind of a bigger issue here, though. I know we were planning on approving, the board was planning on approving the resolution tonight. The county hasn't gotten back to us with the GML review, and I don't believe it's been 30 days from the referral.
it's still in the 30 days?
Yes, I believe so. It wasn't referred right away when there was still some, bigger changes going on, when it wasn't clear what was happening, and I don't know the exact date it was referred, but I know Noreen's been in contact with Megan over there, trying to get something, pushing for it, and
If I was on board, I should, so that my question is then, I can get the comments, but I would like them to be on the agenda next week too, and hope to get it approved. I will work with the county to get this letter. I think it's,
No, I
time
think,
to
well,
finish it up.
we had sent to them, they had given the determination on the other application for this project, and I think Noreen had referred to that in it, saying, you did this, it was a local determination, can you do it quickly? But there hasn't been anything yet, so I don't foresee any issue, but it's jurisdictional.
Does our 30 days, when does our 30 days, when does the 30 days
From when the
end?
county receives it.
Do we know when that happened? Like, so by next Tuesday, would the 30 days have lapsed?
I sent it out on September 30th when the changes were submitted and it went out. I spoke with Megan today. She did not have my email, she said.
Talking to the mic, Noreen.
Sorry. So I sent it out on September 30th, and then I was talking to her today. She did not receive it. My file was too large, so it rejected it, but I never got a kickback saying it was rejected.
Okay.
So I broke it down and sent it to her in smaller pieces today. She was going to work on reviewing it. She saw that she had reviewed it for the ramp and that basically this was for architectural.
Okay.
She has to have everything signed off by the head, and he was not in today.
Alan Sorensen?
So she was going to send me an unconditional one, but she did not send it before the meeting. I've already checked my emails, and I just checked it again. So I will touch base with her in the morning and see if I can get that.
so possibly we can get, if we get
Yeah,
it.
she said she
Yeah.
didn't see any issues
Okay.
with it unless something came up in her review,
Okay.
but she was working on it today for me.
So if it was sent on the 30th, technically October 30th, they have until, but it sounds like she's trying to expedite it.
He is.
So, does the board or anyone have any issue about adding this, especially if it's quick, to next week's agenda, in the event we get something back? Is that all right? Does that seem okay?
Yes,
All right, so hopefully we'll get something. The issue will be if she still hasn't sent anything, the 30 days will not have lapsed, right, by next week. So then we won't have it on the agenda.
I think if we just push, push
I
to
had
get
also
something.
multiple discussions with her on other projects, so I will also speak to her to make sure that we get it on Tuesday.
Great. All right. So, why don't you at this point give an overview of where we are and what the changes were that were made?
Okay, so in general, we got the...
And let me know if you want me to flip through the images.
To the what? To the... So technically, we did a submission. So in general, all the comments were just minor, more clarifications. And I think at the last submission, we have did a very comprehensive, basically resubmitted everything, summarized everything, and did a very detailed list. And still, Ashley's find something in Sean, so we...
Very detailed and diligent.
Yeah, so I think in today we tried to address Ashley's comments too. I don't know, we'll see if she has anything more. And we have a comment letter from Sean that might be a portion of it is probably addressed, was basically Ashley's comments too. So let's, I don't know if you want to start with the consultants going through the comments and see what has been addressed and see what stays open, and we'll summarize the list. And basically so we can submit that, maybe have a complete submittal for the next Tuesday.
And if they're that minor, we might even just condition the
I
approval
worked-
on.
I did prepare a resolution, and even after receiving these materials today, I revised it. I did send it just a little bit before this meeting, but I worked my remaining comments as conditions, that way. So I don't know if you want to look at those conditions, if you want to go over Sean's first and see if,
Sure, so, Sean, why don't you go through your, any remaining comments?
Sure, so I went through what we had discussed at the last meeting that I didn't see was addressed. First being the air conditioner. Currently, it's on those few cinder blocks, so just making sure that that's on a substantial base.
I think we provided, there's going to be a concrete, small concrete pad under it. Okay.
I didn't see that
We'll
anywhere.
put a detail on that.
Sure.
No problem.
I believe the last application, and I think it was indicated last time that there was going to be recessed lights on the eastern elevation towards 208. I didn't see those in the renderings. The soffits, I think you were going to label what type of material that was going to be and what color. And then just identifying what's existing versus proposed for the siding.
I think for the soffits.
I believe you added the soffits.
The soffits is on,
Okay.
and what is existing, what is not existing was discussed one of the previous meetings, but now I have basically a comprehensive updated plan, so it's very hard now to break it out, but we're basically keeping where we're changing color, we're doing new, so that's going to be the look of the building at the end of the day.
So it's going to be white soffits?
Whatever is specified here, yes. It's going to be white soffits.
I don't know if we came to a resolution regarding the planters that were previously proposed. None are proposed now.
Okay, I was showing the comment. So basically, in the approval, we never have any planters. One of the renderings
I would
to
beg to differ.
propose
Yeah.
to propose before we build the stones to cover the ramp with the stones, we have suggested maybe put some planters to cover the wooden ramp. But at the end, we finished up with that. We added up with that, and we didn't propose that. No plantings was proposed or named on any of the submissions in the last.
Understood. I know that the previously approved rendering had planters in it, so that's why I just bring it up.
Yeah, I thought we were going to have, I thought you
It was
did
not
say,
but that was not part of the site plan approval, was not specified. It was basically a visual thing. It was not
I thought you were going to put
approved.
landscape, like just some landscaping or some
Going to basically
minor
put-
flower beds or something in there. That's what I recall from a conversation or a discussion.
It was discussed, but at the end of the day, that was something that we were discussed to put instead of the stone, to cover the wood of the ramps. But I never had a landscape architect that any specific landscapes proposed there. But
George, can you hear everything? Okay. What is the date of the ones that we formally approved?
I think it's August 16.
August?
That's what I remember. I think it's 8.
20th, maybe?
Yeah, 8.
That one?
16.
So there was going to be the planter here,
The planter box here that was removed as part of the new design.
and then there were some shrubs over by where the unit is. All right, well, let's get through the comments, and then we could talk about the final landscaping.
Okay.
That's all.
Ashley, do you have any comments?
I want to pull up the resolution. I sent it, because I had worked those all into the conditions. I sent it at 5:22.
So we'll go, obviously, we can't approve it this evening, but we'll go through what's in here. So nature of the application, you were seeking amended architectural review approval, and you had previously received it August 18th, 2020. Tax map 1-1-87, you're in the HI zoning district of the town of Monroe. This is the basis for the plans. And I don't know, is this going to update that based on what we
I
just
don't
received?
believe so, because that was just the first page, and I don't believe anything changed on that first page.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see it's 8/16/21. Okay. Signage plan, floodlight specifications, cylinder, spotlight, ramp stone, material list, siding.
Material list, so that's something that it should have a new revision date, because you did revise that, but it still had. So that's why I wrote dated 9/17, but it was revised and resubmitted. One of the
will-
conditions is going to be to add that.
I will resubmit that
With the
package
revision
with the
date.
revision date, so we have it on record, and you put in the
Perfect.
new revision date, and, okay.
Lighting specifications. Are we clear? Okay, so on the floodlight with full shield, and I just want to make sure that we also add the Kelvin value, if it's not in here somewhere.
It's there, it's 3,000.
In the cut sheet,
It's,
circled.
it's in the cut sheet, but I actually like it here also, in the floodlight specification. Application was filed with the planning board, April 29, 2021. No requirement for a public hearing. This is a type 2 action. As you can see, the GML referral, this is still open until we receive something back from the county. Our findings, this application does not involve public improvements. And then we get to the specific conditions. So if everybody wants to read that. Subject to final engineering review, shall not be signed until receipt of a letter from the planning board engineer certifying that all deficiencies have been remedied. Material list shall have a revision date of 10/14/2021. You'll submit spec sheets for the signage materials consistent with the color and design presented in the renderings.
So there's on the material list, it does list specific product numbers and material numbers, but there's no corresponding, whether it's a color sheet or whatever it is, it's referring to something on the list, there's just no corresponding detail sheet.
Okay.
Which item is it?
It's for the
Signage?
sign. You list all these, like Endless Sea is the blue color and all that, so they're taken from somewhere, I just don't know
Which
where.
number?
It's
Which num-
number, signage colors 14,
Okay,
so it goes down there's a few rows where you list all these different colors. So they had to have come from somewhere.
okay, we'll figure that out.
Are the materials addressed for the signage somewhere?
There is a detail for that.
On the actual, the signage plan?
No, on the other sheet. There's another sheet. The
First sheet,
first sheet of that,
lower right corner.
right. Yep.
Next condition is about the front door and the signs, the phone number signs. So the rendering is showing sconce lights, but you're referring to material number 12, which is the spotlights. So I think that should be changed to number 13, assuming staying as the,
Okay, I see.
those are all the rest of them. Rest of the conditions don't require any changes to the actual submission unless the board's going to require some landscaping, but condition number 5 requires only the approved materials. There is a note that for the ones with the siding where you had listed the manufacturer or a comparable, so we say you could use a comparable, but the building inspector has to confirm that it's comparable as to quality, color, and all of that.
Because we just had the ones that we listed, we just changed manufacturer because the other manufacturer basically is outsold, so.
Okay, yeah, so that's why that'll allow you to do
Complicated, yeah.
that, just submit it to the building inspector, to show it still matches. The standard lighting note that you have. Conditions about only building, what's shown on the plans, and then your general conditions.
For the lawn area, are you putting sod in, or are you just going to seed it?
Basically hay and seeded.
Okay, so you have to remove the stone that's there, right?
Yes, we'll
Okay.
basically break it and we'll remove the topsoil and we'll finish the landscaping, so.
Okay, so I think just in the approval to mention that is
on the.
it on the plan?
It's on the approved site plan that was originally approved on 8/16 at that time. There is a detail, basically, a standard detail how to finish the topsoil and everything on the grass. So maybe we should put a condition that we shall follow that detail on the approved site plan, the original approved site plan.
So,
The condition is you have to, except as otherwise modified, all conditions attached to all earlier grants of site plan approval remain in effect, and this is conditioned on your satisfaction of those. I mean, that's technically not a condition. So do you want to add a note about,
I would just, to emphasize, just say including, requirements for landscaping, topsoil, just as a reminder. Because if the topsoil's not put in, then it just becomes this kind of scrubby mess, so. Getting to the landscaping, does the planning board feel that any landscaping or plant materials need to be added? We should probably refer to the code, too. Ashley, do you recall if there's any requirements in the code for the landscaping?
Not offhand, I mean, general land. Not dealing with a
Not
non-residential use next to, residential, so that's something that's not an issue that I do believe is specifically addressed in there.
Nothing has been changed from the prior approval to this approval regarding to the codes.
I know one of the items was the screening of the, the condenser, but that was done with the siding materials instead, and I know the board had discussed landscaping. I know there was once, I think, some comments about whether or not it would be maintained properly, that it might, not really have the effect you want if it's landscaping that's planted and just becomes overgrown, or whether there's something that's low maintenance.
I mean, our standards do talk about the use of flowering annuals and perennials is encouraged in areas close to pedestrian movement, shall receive frequent maintenance, mix of plant materials. I would just say, I mean, I don't think we have to go over the top, but I think just then, rather than lawn, if you could have a couple of landscape beds as you come in, for flowers to change them out, I think that would be fine.
Okay.
I don't know that you have to have, at this point, shrubs. I mean, in the best of all worlds, I would like that, but we've come pretty far on this application, and I think just to dress it up a little bit,
So,
it would be attractive, but just some kind of landscape bed. You don't even have to, I don't know that we have to show it on a site plan, just
okay.
know that
Good faith.
to dress it up, yes.
Okay, no problem.
That's I don't know if anybody feels otherwise.
I think as long as the landscaping is cleaned up one way or the other, that's what's important.
Anthony?
I agree.
Lisa? Landscaping? Okay. Pat?
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. All right. So just put something in there to dress it up a little bit, Joel.
Okay.
So at this point, we'll try and get this on our agenda for Tuesday. Hopefully, is it Megan that's reviewing it? Megan will get back to us with any revisions she may have, and we'll go from there.
Yeah,
And you have a sense of what the resolution's going to look like.
correct.
All
Okay.
right.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
very much.
Next item in the agenda is Congregation Habonis, 20 Allison Drive. Good evening. And once you're settled in, if you would just state your name for the record and give us an update on where we are.
So, I'm Joel Mann, Brachman Associates. I hope we have the resolution ready so we can go through, the same as we did at the previous application.
High hopes.
Good evening, Madam Chair. My name is Dan Richmond with the law firm Zarin and Steinmetz.
Thank you.
Good evening, Larry Toro at Civil Tech Engineering.
Good evening, John Till, architect.
You.
John Till, T-I-L-L.
Who wants to give the overview?
Good evening. We've submitted some plans based upon the previous comments that were raised, both at the site walk as well as comments. A lot dealt with some of the landscaping and trees and some clearing limits. There was the issue on the fire access road, which we've upgraded that to a 26-foot wide with the proper cul-de-sac at the end. We do need to still provide the detail for that as far as the section through it. I guess some of the comments we're looking to get some direction on is Oh, let me just go back also, I apologize. There was also some information requested at the intersection of Cromwell Hill and Allison Drive. We've provided that, as well as the turning in from Allison Drive into the site. So we gave some information on that as far as the existing field conditions. As far as some of the comments, we really need to get some direction on further is, I guess, with the landscaping, the tree removal, et cetera, along with, there was the issue of the fence that we had proposed along the driveway to shield the neighbors. I know Karen Arendt had made some comment regarding a cedar-type fence, and then I guess more importantly, the issue of height. It's a double-edged sword. You know, we proposed 6 feet. She indicated that that's not high enough to shield the school bus, so I don't know what height she has in mind. And then conversely, then comes the issue of what height, based upon the zoning, we can have in the front yard. So, I mean, those are some comments that we need some direction on.
Just to chime in.
Yeah.
Good evening. Just to chime in with what Larry said, we're looking for, I think we got to develop a concrete roadmap. We know specific issues the planning board is looking for. We are looking to advance this application. It seems a lot of it has to do with landscaping at this point, so we want, I think, we thought we had provided what your board was looking for. We were surprised by some of the comments. But, you know, again, we're looking forward to working with your board. We read your council's letter. We did write, there is RLUIPA case law indicating that the boards, as a general proposition, can through delay, expense, or uncertainty, burden an applicant. We are certainly not, we were here before your board, we are certainly not suggesting that we are exempt from ordinary planning requirements. But again, New York law does require special consideration. We are, you know, we think we have kind of, again, gone far to address your board's concerns, and we're looking forward to working with you in a constructive path to move this forward on a definitive path. So if we could go through, you know, Madam Chair, I don't know if you have specific, how you would like this meeting handled this evening, but we would look to, again, come out of this meeting with a specific direction for where we go so that we can all be on the same page, so there are no surprises on either side.
So customarily, we ask our consultants for their comments that they may have, and then we go around to the board members in terms of any comments the board members have, and then we look to see what we can do procedurally. I think the one thing that we can do this evening was declare ourselves lead agency, because the 30 days has come and gone, so, but why don't we start with, so is that essentially the presentation at this point?
I mean, we're happy to go through the plan. I think by now the board's familiar with the plan, and if you'd like us to walk you through it again.
Well, I don't know that we've heard from Mr. Till. I don't know that you've been here previously.
Sure.
So my question is there anything he wants to impart to us as far as his involvement, and I guess it's with regard to the building itself?
Sure. I don't have anything to add tonight, other than what's been already submitted as far as architectural plans.
Okay,
But
thank
I'm here for support.
you.
Sorry. John Till is providing, the services he's providing in connection with this project include the code compliance issues. So he's here tonight in case any of that comes up. But I think, again, our submission addressed that, including, for example, there was a suggestion by the fire department that there needed to be access on all 3 sides of the building. But I think we've explained in our latest submission that that's actually not required for a building of this size.
All right. Okay, so with that, then, why don't we start with Sean, and then we'll go to Ashley, and then go around to the board members. Thank you.
Just in response to that last comment regarding the, additional sides of the building to have access from the fire code, our architect did, confirm that that is the case. I think there was a couple thresholds that maybe he may have disagreed with, but in all intents and purposes, I believe it meets it. So regarding the fire access, so they widened the driveway, as we discussed in the field and at the last planning board meeting to be 26 feet, since it's longer than, since the driveway is longer than 150 feet. They also provided the cul-de-sac bulb, which is 96 feet in diameter, which also meets the code. However, the code does require a certain radius for where it enters the bulb, from the 26-foot starting the bulb. That wasn't identified on there, so that should be added. As Larry said, a detail will have to be provided for the construction of that roadway, and will have to be provide at least 75,000 pounds to meet the fire code. Regarding the 6-foot-high fence along the driveway, it didn't indicate whether or not the existing gate across the existing driveway was to be removed. And it looks like it's going to be on path through the proposed widening of the driveway. So I just, ask that be looked at. Regarding the dumpster enclosure, it's kind of at an odd angle for a truck to be able to get to it, so I, ask that be looked at. Regarding the 10 additional spaces, or future spaces as they're called out on the plan, there wasn't any grading provided for those. And with that specific item, currently the total proposed area for the project is 0.96 acres, which is dangerously close to the threshold for a SWIP. So, that'll have to be looked at closely, and whether or not a SWIP will have to be provided may weigh or may come into effect. Grading is necessary for those 10. The lights that are down the existing driveway, I didn't know if those were going to be relocated or taken out.
They'll be removed.
Removed.
And and I think part of it was we weren't putting lighting along the driveway so as not to impact the, joiners on both sides. There was going to be lighting on the building itself, but
Right.
not on the roadway.
Which I didn't see the proposed locations of the lights or cut sheets on the lights.
All right, we'll have to check with the architectural plans on that,
Okay,
because we'll put them on there.
okay.
Is that?
Did you get architecturals?
If not, it will be added.
So, I just asked that a lighting plan be prepared. So the landscape architect, the board's landscape architect has provided comments. Did you guys receive those? I think they were sent yesterday? Okay. Regarding the turning radiuses, both onto, or I should say out of the property onto Allison Drive and out of Allison Drive onto Cromwell Hill, I think the board had asked that those turning radiuses be provided too. Right now, everything's into the project, so they had asked for out of the project. Regarding the, I saw that you provided the responses to the county DPW for the sewer connection. So I didn't see the questions. You have the permit. Okay.
Can you, oh, it did? You broke it. Do we have another, or?
I have batteries.
Yeah,
left,
let's try
man.
that out. Because I couldn't hear what you said, Joel, about permit. I thought you said we have approved permit, but I couldn't hear.
Joel, you want to switch the batteries in?
George, did you put old batteries in? They're working on it. They're putting the cover on. I think it is.
It is
All right, okay.
Yeah, it works.
So Joel, could you repeat what you said about the permit? Because I didn't
So
I didn't
basically,
get
we
that.
received the permit today. So
From
what is-
Orange County Health
from Orange
Department?
County Sewer District. So what I said is that we need approval, planning board approval as soon as possible, so the permit does not expire.
Did you send us a copy of that?
Didn't have a chance.
All right, when did you receive that?
Just today.
Oh, you received it today?
Yesterday night, yesterday the client got that to his mail, so I just received that to my office today.
Okay. So if you'll send that over to us all for the record.
Sure.
Regarding the ADA access, I see there's a blow-up on the upper left-hand side of the site plan on the first sheet. I question whether or not ADA, or the ramp from the covered porch to the landing into the dwelling, if that meets ADA slope, as well as the rear slope down to the back. So,
We did that calculation. You questioned it last time.
Right.
too. What is the specific, do you see anywhere where the calculation doesn't meet the requirements? We did.
yes, on the back side,
Yes.
where it goes from 857.98 to 856.19, I believe that's greater than 1 on 12.
856.19 to 857.
And from the covered porch to the landing, it's only a 6-foot ramp, but I think it's greater than 6 inches increase, so.
Okay, that's small adjustments.
Sure. I believe at the site visit, the Monroe Conservation Commission suggested that the tree clusters on the front side of the house be removed.
The one by the driveway we'll remove because that's right near the turnaround anyway. But since we don't have to put anything in the front, I don't think there's any need to take down the one that's in front of the building.
I defer to them and to Karen on that. so.
All right.
The discussion at that time was about the fire department request, but if we don't need it by code,
Right.
we don't need to do that, then the best for the property and for everyone is to keep the landscaping there and not to
Yeah,
disturb.
my understanding was that they weren't really in good health, but that's, again, I defer to them on that. Regarding the sewer connection down into Cromwell Hill and Maple Avenue, there wasn't a detail for the restoration of the roadway. That'll have to be provided. Regarding the chain link fence that's proposed, typically the board requires black or green vinyl coated on all the components.
Say that again, please, Sean?
Regarding the chain link fence, typically that's required to be black or green vinyl coated. All the components.
If we go with,
Correct, right, yep. Which is proposed currently, so. And then lastly, we should discuss SECRA, which we briefly touched on already, but.
that's it, John?
That's it, yep.
All right, Ashley?
So just to start, I do understand, you brought up Ray Lupa tonight, and this board's aware of Ray Lupa and what it requires and hasn't been, delaying anything. We've just been simply asking for information that's been either not provided or provided in part, and, this is the normal planning board process. As you saw with the other applications that were before us tonight, the board requires, comprehensive submission, so.
Well, actually, that's what I was saying at the beginning. I mean, I think it would be helpful if we came out of this meeting with a clear roadmap of exactly what the planning board's looking for, so we could be sure to comprehensively address it, so we can
So, I
progress
mean,
with the application.
I thought that we had a pretty comprehensive list that you and I had, corresponded about after the last meeting, but then this latest submission did not, really address all of those things, so I
guess
think there's,
we think it did. I mean, but again, that's
there's
what I hope we
some,
can do this evening, is kind of figure out
confusing there,
exactly
but-
where you think the gaps are, and we can provide you, again, to be sure that the planning board has the information it's looking for, so we can move forward.
So as far as seeker goes, the board, as Bonnie indicated, you would be able to assume lead agency status tonight. One of the things, just since we're talking about seeker, is there's a note on the plan about the DEC time of year, the tree cutting for the northern long-eared bat, but the note says that you're going to comply with that, or you would do a survey if you weren't going to. I just wanted to see if you decided which you were going to do. Are you going to comply, or are you going to do the survey? Because if you're going to do the survey, that's something that'll need to be, done for seeker.
I believe that depends when the approval date will be. If the approval date will be in the time that we can cut it, and between... If the approval date will be between March 31st and November 1st, that's one case, or between November 1st and March 31st, it's another case. So can someone predict now in which month I'm going to get this approval? I don't think so. So...
Well, customarily, it's one or the other. So, did you
The issue is
anticipate
for in
doing a
order
bat
to make
survey?
a-
And I only say this because I think doing a bat survey is not
Sometimes it's
a
dangerous.
month-long process, so,
I did that before.
okay. And what was involved?
Basically, coming the night before and surveying, looking, I don't remember
You have
exactly.
to do
the
like a
date.
bat mist net survey?
What?
You have to do a bat mist net survey?
I don't know all the languages. But
Okay.
I know I hired a professional who did it, and it was done correctly. The DC were involved. It was a wetlands area, so the state wetlands, DC was involved, and everything went through very smooth. Wasn't a big deal.
Okay.
My question, do you taking permit?
Well, I don't know what happens at this point because you have both options there. If you just avoid taking down the trees during that time period, I think you don't need a permit.
Correct.
But if you're going to do it during that time frame,
So that's basically...
even if you do the survey, I don't know if you still need some kind of taking permit or if that's unless that's the whole purpose of finding out if there are bats there.
Depends on the criteria, but not always. But we'll need to check on it. So the question is, why?
Okay.
Let's keep it that way. If we're going, depends on the planning board approval. If we don't need it, then we don't need it. If it's going to be in the time.
But the question
Issue
is, do you
for
need a
seeker,
permit?
And for seeker, in order to make a determination of significance, because it's one thing if the applicant's committed to complying with the
So then-
the
so-
criteria, but another, if
Okay,
there's going
we'll
to be a
com-
survey, it'll have to be done in order to make a
So
determination.
we'll comply with that. Put on the note, we'll go in that direction that we will comply.
You'll comply with the March 31st to October 31st?
Yes.
So we'll remove unless a survey is conducted for the potential of habitat site.
Correct.
Okay. I mean, you can come back if you think something different, but
understand.
for now, that's what
Yep.
you're, okay.
A note on the tree plan with the number of trees, which is probably going to change again, but the plan had stated 33 for the driveway. I had only counted 30, just to make sure those numbers are correct. And I mean, most of my comments I've outlined in the letter I had sent to the applicant's attorney. I don't know if you want to go through those all. Do you want me to?
Some things.
Well, again, yeah, let's go through exactly what you're looking for on certain items.
On the mic, please.
Sure. I think it would be helpful if we went through exactly what the board is looking for, so again, so we're not going around. So, as I first understood it, you're looking for, I mean, we did provide photographs showing where the existing landscaping exists, and I'm not sure your question is to have additional photographs.
Look at where that location. Attached to the,
There's basically a site plan that shows the direction where we were standing, taking the pictures, and after that.
I don't think it
there
was
is the
attached to the
pictures.
letter, it's a separate document.
Not to this letter.
not to my, it was attached to Dan.
I don't know if it was
Oh,
attached to
I
this letter.
guess
but-
it's attached on
to the
my,
letter. It was one of the separate PDFs, probably. Okay, that's where it is.
Have the 4 views which are from the building itself, but there's nothing, if you look at, there was nothing taken from the parking area.
I can take more, but I believe the board was there, and everything was very clear that the whole property is vegetated. And like we said, if there is any specific certain areas that the board is concerned, we will provide that. Our belief is that this site is the best vegetated as possible. So, like I said, I see in the comments from Karen about screening around the parking. I didn't understand it because the whole property is screened. I understand there is going to be a discussion about the driveway in. We'll have a separate discussion about that. But in general, the property, the back of the house is basically, there's a big hill up. There's nothing that we can do here, and that's the best screening. So the other house is much, much higher than this one. Other ones are lower. And we don't see and believe that there's anything specific that we do. Again, there is a list of trees that we're going to take out. If we need to put in other trees, you can point out where you want us to put it back and the best areas. For example, the sewer line and the driveway, that's where we're going to take out the trees. We can provide it around the property, whatever you desire. But I don't see any major landscaping needed for that, and I think that was my understanding with the feeling with the board of the property at the meeting on the property. I will get the feeling from the board on that, and before we're going to discuss the entrance.
The comment was because you were relying on these photos, saying, look at these photos, they show everything is screened, but the photos weren't showing, how the parking is screened, and that's one of the requirements that's in the special use permit criteria. So that's what that purpose was. If, you alternatively add what's, a note showing what's there. I know that is an area that was visible,
So that
You
was
could
the
see
discussion,
the neighboring
that
houses, yes, so
whole
that's-
area, we will plant the trees that we need to mitigate for the cutting down the trees. That was the discussion at that point. So,
Okay, yeah, and I think Karen, as you had mentioned, Karen's comments, so I think it's really,
but no one gave us,
You know,
I believe,
incumbent-
the specific that's what they're looking for. My understanding from the comment letters was,
At this point, is
Well,
there a
we had talked-
landscaping plan?
what?
Is there a landscaping and lighting plan attached to this?
Not yet.
Okay, but there will be.
There will be.
Okay.
and that was something Karen had, requested because she reviews and responds to what you submit, so she's not gonna design your landscaping plan for you. She gave you some general comments at the site visit. It's incumbent on you to listen to those and submit something that she could then respond to.
Areas.
So it's just
Okay.
pictures, the only thing that's missing, you're saying, are pictures from the proposed parking area?
To make
I'm
sure
not,
to
sa- I'm not
show-
saying you have to, I'm saying you were saying we're relying on these photos that show it's screened everywhere, but the photos were only showing only around the building, they weren't showing the parking. You don't have to give photos if you're trying to rely on photos, though, then you should. I think it's really the bigger issue is you need the landscaping plan that Karen can then respond to. Because you haven't been putting any, showing the dimensions or anything of the existing vegetation that you're relying on.
can
You're
see-
instead relying on the photos, but there needs to
There's
be,
an existing tree line on the site plan that you can see there.
Yeah, I mean, I think I guess I came from the site visit with the understanding that we were showing, I don't think the board expects us to survey every single tree on the site. I think,
that was never requested, no. But,
Right.
well, as
But-
far as
but there
things
is-
that you're
but there-
removing, you have to
but there
replace, but
is-
you have to abide by the.
There
you
is
have
an
to show what
expectation that
the-
there's a certain diameter height.
Exactly, and if
that
you don't meet that, then you're requesting a waiver. The board wants to know the extent of the waiver that's being requested, so.
So you have shown some of the individual trees here, and part of the question is, there's this area being shown as far as landscaping in this location, is that covered, or is that just lawn area? Do you recall?
that's lawn area. I mean, I think, again,
Well,
everyone was.
look, before you say that, there's a tree line going in here, so that's why I'm asking the question. So you see where I'm,
That's the existing tree line. I mean, there's a tree line around the edge of the
No,
property.
so the question is if we're cutting any trees there.
Are we cutting trees in this?
Yeah. I think in the previous plan, it wasn't degrading in that area, so we need, basically the intent was to survey all the areas that we are going to grate or do some renovations, so there is any tree, if we're going to remove any trees. And we'll actually, this is one additional area that wasn't on the previous plan, so we'll add the tree locations in that area to see what is there and what is being removed.
I think it all ties into our tree law and knowing what's being removed, because then we have to put
Correct.
either the same back or have some kind of fee.
It's twofold. You have the tree law, and then you have those special use permit requirements that require, I think it's 25 feet of screening, and then parking by evergreens or certain types of trees, 2.5 inches in diameter. So what I was asking for in this first comment was to explain, you say existing tree line, but it doesn't describe what trees are there, because this is going to, if you're asking the board to approve this, it's going to be a plan for the property. It needs to be abided by, so what, doesn't have to be every single tree, what's there.
So a general description of the trees.
Whether it meets that width or not. What is it, the 25-foot width for the structures? Sections 5713 R7 and 8. Whether there's different on, lean off. Whether there's leaf on and leaf off conditions that would change, that would impact
Can I ask,
visibility.
related to that, Ashley, what you're describing, so when I look at sheet 204, you have the Allison Drive tree identifications. You have 1 through 71. And you also have the health of it, you have the species. I think it'd be really useful if you had another column that said which ones are you removing. Because these are the ones that you took that are within the potential area of disturbance. And what's unclear to me is if you're showing a detail of the trees that are within is that the entirety of the septic easement? You have a portion of the driveway.
And there is a portion of the driveway and parking area particularly that needs to be added and
Yeah, because I see.
showing the limits.
Yeah, because it doesn't go up to where the turnaround area is and where the parking is, and then you have a portion of the septic area. What is CLF? Is that your fence?
Can you show on the screen?
Oh, sure. What is that? I'm sorry, chain link? Okay. So it looks like you have this piece shown like up to around here, right? So what I'm confused about is then where you make the jog and right to about here, the blow-up on the second sheet shows CLF, chain link fence. And I don't see where there's a chain link fence here, unless it's on a different sheet. Is it on a different sheet?
Chain link fence where it gets into the opening?
Is this the latest plan sheet set?
Yeah, this is the one that, I'm pretty sure it's the one I got. Yeah, let me check the date.
It is on the first sheet. It's here. This one?
July 27?
I
Maybe it's
think
not.
what it is,
Are
the
you
sheet,
not seeing it on?
the sheet you're looking at
this
is
is-
the
that's
one
an
that
old
was used
plan.
for the photographs. Yeah, that's for me, it's the,
Should be dated September 29th.
Bonnie, when we went on the site walk, there was a fence in the woods.
So that was something that,
Yeah.
they asked it, okay.
No, I
yeah,
think the
so-
fence was existed.
was added to the plan after.
Oh, you know what happened?
Identified it on the plan.
I think your photo direction, your photo direction is on an older base.
My office did it, and we used the previous plan.
Okay, that's what did it, sorry about that. All right, so, okay, so this is the site plan, that is the most recent. All right, so this is the CLF you're showing. And then you hit the clearing. And there are no trees shown there. So then the question becomes, you're showing the driveway up to,
That fence. For the parking?
right in here. CLF. I see 43 and 44 on the blow up. So you go up to about here. So the question is, what is happening from here to here to here to here to here to here to here? Are there any trees, or is it, I mean, you show some trees in here, and it doesn't look like you're proposing to cut them, so over in this area, there aren't trees? And then the question here is because you're coming kind of into the tree line?
Right, in one area, correct.
The one area,
And there is, I think, one also in the actual parking space area.
over in here.
So there needs to be, like was done for the areas of disturbance, the blow-ups, and completed for that portion as well, identifying any trees being removed.
So if you're doing grading in here, is this 10-incher going? And I think the other point was that we're not showing grading for the future. So we don't know where this limited disturbance could occur. You know, and I presume that when you get approved, if you need the spaces, you're going to want to put them in. So to that end, it affects the SWIP also, because we're not showing the full limits of disturbance.
Correct.
Which is actually what we've required on other applications.
I think, I don't know which order you want to go, but if they touch the parking, I think there's in Ashley's letter, they want to see a location where they can see a school, a girls' school, and that's similar. Said to prove that they don't need the more than 5 parking spaces.
I think, though, the issue is if you're asking for this board to vary the parking requirements and use this land-banked parking, you have to show that it's still, you know, where you would put it, how you would do it for purposes of disturbance and all that. If you were to get a variance and then have only 5 is required based on, you know, your needs from the zoning board, that's something different, then you wouldn't have to show this additional. But if they're going to be land-banked, it has to be treated as if you're going to be building them, so.
It's no different than Monroe Commons.
Joe was asking a sort of a tangential issue, which is just to, you know, our showing that the land banking is warranted. I think you were looking for an example of other schools.
Yeah, so I said last time, I believe we can look at Glenwood. If you want, I can take you to the schools, the village, in the middle of the day when it's full operation. There are a couple thousand kids, probably 5 cars. Like, with a couple thousand kids, not 100 kids, because it's basically the managers. None of the teachers, none of the girls are driving, so
Are they coming in on the van or on the bus?
basically the teachers come together with the bus,
Okay.
yes. Or like with a separate taxi.
Is, I guess, hold that thought, so we'll get back to that. Let's kind of finish up the landscaping.
Okay.
Because that's a traffic
Yep.
question, I think.
Okay.
So Ashley, you want to continue?
Again, it's
Let's
really,
just, can we just summarize before we move on? So the landscaping, you're looking for, as I understand it, what trees within the potential limits of disturbance are being removed? Is that correct?
Basically.
it's trees of a certain, I think, calibers,
Trees of a
whatever's in
certain
the tree
caliber, I get it.
preservation law. It's as you've done it for these other areas. but within the entire limits slash potential future limits.
And can I just ask a quick question to confirm, since we're talking, just before we leave this subject? This is showing trees to be removed, this one? Is that on the site or is that off the site?
I think that's just a symbol.
Yeah, no, my question is, this is your property line, isn't it?
Right, but it's
just like a
supposed to be a
legend symbol.
legend.
It's just a legend, a symbol. It's not actually, that tree, there's no tree there that we know.
You're saying there's no tree there?
It's just showing they use that
It's just a
symbol to
legend, it's
show
saying-
what's being removed.
For future, for reference on other parts of the, I mean, if it's confusing there,
Yeah,
it can be
definitely
moved.
confused.
Okay.
And as,
What this looks like to me is that you're removing a tree on an adjoining property, the way that it's shown.
No, I think the legend is that 15 trees are being removed and those 15 are identified with that X. It's not, yes.
We'll fix it.
X is not being removed, or X is being removed.
X, 15 trees are being removed. And if you look just north of that, you'll see a couple of those X's.
Right in here.
Yes.
So these are being removed, right? Correct?
Yes.
Okay, so, again, I had a very late night and very little sleep yesterday. Is this X showing that this tree is one of the trees to be removed?
No, that's a symbol. It's a legend, it's a key.
Oh, so you put the key, okay. So your key is on someone's, it's sitting on someone's property, so I think we need to move it somewhere
You
else.
want it somewhere less confusing. We
Yeah,
get it.
got it. Because it makes it look like you're removing a tree from someone's property, that's all. Thank you.
and related to that, it's helpful, I think you had mentioned it before, to add just a column where you have the tree tables saying what's being removed, what's staying, because then it's easy to add them all up and figure that out. But, I mean, the real main thing for the screening and landscaping is to submit a landscape screening plan that then the board's landscape architect can, respond to.
And then, I think when we get to the SWIP, there'll just be a question of whether a SWIP is needed, but whether or not we're within the threshold of a SWIP or not, I think we need some silt fencing shown where you start to get close to a property line with some of the clearing, so you're not gonna end up encroaching on your neighbor. I'm not concerned about it up by the top of that cul-de-sac where you're doing grading, because I think you have a stone fence up there, right? I think there's a stone wall,
There is. Yep.
right? So up in here, where you're proposing grading, unless someone thinks differently. Oops. That stone wall will limit you going on to someone else's property. But down in here, where you start to get close, in here, in here, in here, I think we need to add some silt fencing
Do you mean
to
silt
show limits
fencing
of
or
disturbance.
construction fencing?
Like,
Like
I would
orange
yeah.
construction fencing.
I would suggest construction fence, yeah.
Wild construction.
Well, I mean,
To-
if you want to put a self fence in, because this could erode and in theory go down into the neighbors, you probably do need,
Wild construction,
you'll
silt fencing. That's
put the self fencing in.
Well, I think the orange construction fence, to Bonnie's point, is to prevent grading onto someone else's property, so.
Whether you need silt fencing is a different matter, but,
Right.
but definitely I want to try and avoid going onto the neighbors' properties. Okay?
Some other requirements that are in the tree preservation law that need to be met, that's to demonstrate how buffers, open space, and trees to be saved will be protected during construction. So usually there would be some type of detail showing that would be on the landscape plan. Also designate buffer zones of at least 15 feet along all perimeters of tree stands to be protected, as well as critical root zones around existing trees where trees will not be removed or disturbed. There's also some map note language that I had included in that letter. I don't think you need me to reread it here, but that's standard that goes on the plan. So it was, again, the trees have to be replaced on a one-to-one basis, or there's the fee in lieu, so that again goes to submitting that landscaping and tree plan.
Get their sin. About the tree preservation law?
Tree plan preservation law map notes, and then the one-to-one replacement, which is related to, again, that landscaping plan that will be provided.
I think we got that.
Okay.
Yeah, so basically, we'll,
The tree protection details, buffer zones, all
as I
that.
said, we'll do all of that. We'll have a landscape plan, and we'll propose the trees, the new trees to be planted in the areas that we feel is less screened, and that.
And then, and Karen's letter, I believe, yeah, identified some.
And I think that's basically what we discussed in the field at the site visit, so.
Yes, but then from Karen, we got last time a little bit more input that we. We got a little bit confused with Karen's letter after the meeting, on what's needed, so we wasn't sure how the board will look at it. So basically, we will propose exactly what we are proposing based on our submission here with the pictures, and we'll add the landscaping where we want, we feel that we need to propose it, and we'll get the boards and professionals' comments on that.
And if you're showing a tree line that's 25 feet and you say this meets the code, mark that, say, we don't have to do something like that, or if.
Maybe.
Oh, I don't know when you did do your plan for the tree removal. She did discuss this on the site walk, but everybody was kind of talking to everybody, so I don't know if you picked it up. But she does talk about if a tree is near and there's going to be grading and then additional asphalt, if you're within the canopy or a certain drip line, it may not be preserved, so it may die anyway. So that was one of her comments, and I don't know if that's reflected on the map. I see your point about the 6-foot-high chain link fence. I don't know if we have anything in our code which actually has a maximum fence height.
I was actually going to say that. So I looked, after seeing that comment, I couldn't find anything. I did reach out to the building inspector, but wasn't able to touch base with him before this meeting. So I don't know if you looked into that.
I don't remember there should be anything in the code about the fence height. So.
What'd you say, Joel?
Yeah,
I couldn't hear you.
Maybe we could follow up with Karen and see where she got that from.
What?
She talked about a 4-foot fence height is the maximum in the front.
Oh, okay.
I never have seen that in the code and going through. I don't think there's even a permit.
I mean, I know other places, it's common to have that in the front yard, but I don't recall.
There's not even a process for a fence here in the town, so I don't think there's any specifications. And again, probably you want to see it 6 feet rather than 4.
I was going to say it's that double.
You want to see it 6 feet rather than 4 feet, so. And so I understand, one of the comments was that that's not sufficient, but based on the walkthrough and based on their comments, there's not even a way to put any landscaping because the landscaping will die there. So actually, based on the walkthrough, she didn't give us any way out of any option besides a fence. So we, instead of getting now in arguments about what type of plantings might be live between the pavement and the property line, it's much easier to propose a fence that makes more sense. We can put a privacy fence. Okay, we can discuss the material, but that was my understanding there at that point. Other than that, unless there's anything others reasonable.
There is, and it's in child daycare centers, but that's where there's a reference to 4-foot-high fencing, outdoor play areas. And then fencing shall not exceed 5 feet in height, but otherwise, unless it's in a different section, I don't see a lot on fencing height. Pools.
Yeah, I think it was showing up around pools. It had to be minimum. Of course, the fence, the board will have architectural review over that, in addition to, I don't know if the board wants to discuss their thoughts on using the fence for screening.
Well, Okay, so from my perspective, if you're putting in a road that's gonna be regularly used for a private school, and it's being expanded to 26 feet, I wanna see landscaping. I wanna see it buffered from the adjoiners.
Well, I mean, there's no code requirement for that, but, again, and the other problem, and I think as Karen pointed out, there's not a lot of room for landscaping if you're requiring us to expand the road.
Well, that's partly the issue of having access from a flag lot where there isn't a lot of room. So if this was in a location where there would be more room, we could put the landscaping in. So that's
we're
the
not-
kind of, that's
basically a road, it's not a.
Yeah, the planning board does have the.
it's a driveway, it's not a road. And normally with the special use permit and with site plan, if it's going between two neighbors and it's a big driveway and it practically is a road at 26, we would want to see some kind of landscaping. So it's,
No, I didn't see any landscaping like an Allison Drive between the road and to the front of the properties or to the side of the properties from Cromwell Hill Drive to all the frontages on every lot, so.
those are houses, not private schools, not with buses coming on.
But the school is a part of the residential fabric. I mean, again, that's,
But it has
I
a
think
different
I would-
operational characteristic.
I
So
would
it's not,
just,
I'm not saying that a school doesn't belong in residential neighborhoods. I'm saying,
Buses are driving in every residential neighborhood with no screening to the roads, between the roads and the houses. So that's the same thing. We have a road next to a residential house with no screening.
they're not driving up that road because it's a cul-de-sac. So this is something new that would occur within this particular location because the Monroe Woodbury School District doesn't go up, as far as I know, doesn't go up to cul-de-sacs.
Correct.
So
That's correct.
a private thing, but private schools are typically going up cul-de-sacs too, and they're allowed to go up. It's a public road. So if there will be any house on this cul-de-sac, they will send their kids in a private school. They will have buses coming into the cul-de-sac picking up the kids.
yeah,
It might happen in the future.
but anyway, so I guess we got to the point that
I didn't, could you repeat that, Joel? Because I really didn't hear it. You weren't that so good on the mic. I apologize.
Basically what I said, that typically, maybe Monroe Woodbury is not going into cul-de-sacs, but the cul-de-sacs are public roads. Buses are allowed to go into that. Private schools are actually, private schools that I know are actually going into cul-de-sacs. For example, if someone in this cul-de-sac will decide to send their kid in a private school, the buses will come in. And there's no screening, and that's because that's the right of a public road. So the same thing here, there is a road, it's a private road.
It is a public, it's a public road.
So this is going
But
to be
at
a
this-
private road.
But what I'm saying is that the cul-de-sac, Allison Drive, does not get buses at this point in
At
time.
this point of time, but
And
it
when,
can- it ca-
and when it was developed,
it can change.
it was not expected because it is a cul-de-sac and for a public school, because that was what was anticipated. No one planned to have a private school in this neighborhood. That doesn't mean that it's not allowed by special use permit. So now we're planning to put a school along a cul-de-sac that subdivision did not anticipate having a school there. So we have to be mindful and respectful of the residents that live there. If there's going to be buses coming in and out, and we have two adjoiners, we need to be, again, mitigating the potential impact to them, whatever that is.
to the maximum extent practicable, bearing in mind, again, this is a religious application and that it can't completely be expected to completely negate its impacts, because as we wrote in our letter, that fails to realize that schools have a beneficial impacts in residential neighborhoods.
But that doesn't stop the planning board from not having the ability to mitigate impacts associated with the school,
Reasonable
whether
mitigations.
it's private or whether it's public.
Reasonable mitigation. So again, we're being required to expand the driveway to a certain length that your landscape architect seems to say makes landscaping infeasible. We've proposed a fence. I'm not sure what the issue is. I mean, if
Because a fence, now to her point, a fence doesn't screen a bus. Landscaping at a certain height as it grows would screen a bus. But now we have this, I don't know if the word's conundrum, we have this issue that because of the width of the road, how are we going to screen it? is there sufficient area to be able to screen along the margins, and let's not call it a road, it's a very wide driveway, to be able to mitigate the visuals of seeing school buses.
So she said that we can't do any landscape. That's what she said at the meeting. I don't know, maybe you can call her down at the next meeting here and discuss that.
She said we couldn't do what?
You couldn't do any plantings because it's going to be, everything will be too close to the road. She had 15, 20 feet, and she said everything will die if we do any landscaping.
Well, so then that raises a question, if you have to have a 26-foot driveway, and you can't put landscaping there, and it's a visual impact, is that an unmitigated situation? Because a fence isn't going to screen it, and is there insufficient area to put?
I don't understand why a fence is not the same, actually.
Because
much
it's not,
more.
it won't have the height that landscaping would
what
to
height-
screen views of a bus coming in.
So what height are you looking for?
Well, I'm trying to, this is why I say it's again, I don't know if the word's conundrum, but it's trying to figure out how to address this, or is this going to end up being an unmitigated visual impact?
I think it's mitigated, I mean, it's mitigated to the maximum extent practicable.
I don't think that's the maximum extent practicable.
Well, if you're saying landscaping's not practicable.
Well, I don't know that landscaping is. I think we need to carefully look at that 26-foot wide driveway. Is there any way to get landscaping between, on your property with evergreens or with landscaping? Can it fit?
If I recall correctly, it was really the one side, because the other side was higher up the neighbor, so I don't know where the proposed driveway extension is going, but if there was more room to go to the other side, and then maybe there would be more room for
And that's a good,
something on that side.
that's a good point, because we also have to consider what's the existing landscaping on the adjoiner's property. If their landscaping takes care of the screening, then it's less of a concern if you're taking out all the trees and all of the landscaping was in fact on the flag. If they have landscaping there that's thick, then their own landscaping is screening the area.
Comment on something you had said, Dan, about it not
Do you not
being-
understand, Dan? Because you're making a perplexed look.
Well, so we should take into account the landscaping on the neighbor's property. I got that, okay. And then, Larry's suggesting there may be some room, in fact, to provide some landscaping along the driveway, perhaps some pines. We can look at that.
It may be something
I think-
columnar,
What's that?
something columnar. Maybe there's a pine or something that rather than growing out, and not arborvitae. Arborvitae gets eaten by
To look for the most expensive thing. probably.
something that, well, that's up to you. Please do. But something that goes up and necessarily doesn't go out might be, I know that there are those varieties of evergreens, so to take a look at that. And then, it's all context related as to who's going to see this from each of the adjoiners.
Right.
And I think
But again-
I would, again, refer you, I mentioned in my letter, the 5721.5C, which does talk about screening of non-residential uses when they're next to, residences, and here it's the unique situation, because you have this flag lot, so it's not just a typical driveway that would be, buses don't typically go down a driveway, I don't think, even for, say, if the neighbors had, a private school. I think that it's because of the way the lot configuration is, that's why the screening is kind of an issue with that driveway area.
Look, I hear what you're saying, but I think, again, I apologize, but I got to remind the board of, its obligation.
The board's well aware, you've reminded them multiple times tonight, you do have to, they understand, accommodating religious uses, but also mitigating adverse impacts.
Can
And
I
if
finish
your-
my
If
sentence?
your engineer is
What I'm
right there,
saying is
if
that
your engineer is saying that it is possible, right here, off the cuff, that it is very possible to be able to have landscaping, for you to then still argue against it is just not reasonable.
We're not, no, we said we look at it, but I think, again, Ashley, I do have to remind the board that they can't impose conditions that through their time, expense, or delay are going to impose substantial burdens.
Thank you, Dan, but I will advise my client, the board, and again, they are aware of the Ray Lupus standards. So I would remind you that you do need to mitigate the adverse impacts to the
Not
neighbors.
to absolutely eliminate
It's
all
twofold.
impacts, that's the law, Ashley. We do not, we're a religious school, we have beneficial impacts under state law.
I did not say eliminate all of them, but I said to mitigate the adverse impacts. So now we're dealing with
Mitigate to the
adverse visual
maximum extent
impacts.
practicable, bearing in mind it's a
It
religious
sounds
school.
like there's
All
an
right,
option for landscaping.
Dan, please. So,
Yes.
Ashley, could you go on? Well, we're aware of the letter, we're aware of your position.
You asked what was on my mind, Madam Chair.
I actually didn't.
You did. You said you have a quizzical look on your face.
No, I was asking about the landscaping
That's what I
and
was
why you
talking
look
about.
perplexed.
That's just why I look perplexed, because I did put this in my letter, and I'm not sure why it's not resonating.
So, well, or is it busing about traffic or busing about landscaping? Okay. Because we're kind of trying to deal with everything under landscaping at this point.
Was that, it's a public road, and at any time, a bus could go up that cul-de-sac. But if you were to have a bus go up that cul-de-sac, because Monroe Woodbury was going to pick up a student there, it would be one bus to pick up a student in that house or on that street. But this is a reverse situation where you have multiple buses going up that street when there ordinarily wouldn't be multiple buses going up that street. So I just wanted to tease that point out.
Thank you. Anybody else on landscaping?
Is it possible the bus doesn't have to go into the driveway? That it can pick the students up or drop them off at the end of the driveway and have a bus monitor walk them, off the bus and to the door and vice versa?
I think that's a lengthy walk, particularly in cold and wintertime, rain hours. I don't think we'd want to commit to
Well,
that.
With young
When-
children?
When we were talking about it, more than likely the bus didn't go up to the cul-de-sac, so you had students, people that would have lived in that home, had their students not only walk down the driveway, but they'd also have to walk down to Cromwell Hill to catch the bus. So that's how the cul-de-sac and that community was designed. So it's a possibility to have the bus, okay, maybe it's a compromise to have the bus go into Allison Lane or Drive and stop at the end of the driveway, because it's not a road, and then to have to make it 26 feet wide, not have enough room for screening, have to have the turnaround, the cul-de-sac in the
So
school
that's still going to be required,
still
to
need that
widen the
for-
driveway and
to widen the
provide
driveway and the cul-de-sac.
Exactly.
Because
Fire.
it's a fire situation, fire emergency
I have
apparatus.
another question along that extent. So are you going to leave the curb cut the same width?
Oh, it's widening it.
And what's the maximum allowable curb width driveway cut on a road, a public road?
I don't know if there's a specific requirement, but we can look at that with John Cherney.
And there's also two pillars at the end of the driveway. Would
Right.
they be removed?
They're noted to be removed, yeah.
So that's going to affect the character of the street.
You want to ask me to respond, Sean? I mean, I think.
That's just my statement.
That's his opinion. I don't know if there's anything to respond to.
That's his opinion, but again, adding a school to a residential neighborhood adds to the character of the street as well.
Sorry, could you repeat that?
By law, adding a residential school to a residential community adds to the character of the community.
So when this project was first presented to me, and I had a chance to take a site visit to see what actual site looked up in real life as opposed to what's in the plan, now we're changing the plan to fit what the applicant's desire is to make of this lot, a little bit more than I thought I had in mind when this was initially presented. So now we're making quite a few more amendments to the site to make this work.
Madam Chairman?
Yes.
So I have a question. What we're trying to do with the trees is to mitigate the visual impact to the neighbors, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So they don't necessarily have to be along the driveway. We just need trees to block the individual neighbors. For instance, the neighbors that are on Cromwell Hill Road, down there, you could have trees, right along that fence line that's there.
I'm not following
I think
here.
at this
They're
point,
I just want to
talking
bring up,
about
at the same time, an
specifically
image
screening
that
the-
shows the
screening
driveway.
the
Driveway.
driveway and the buses that are going to be on the driveway. It's that area that they're focusing on now, and how to screen that from
Right,
those
from the
neighbors.
neighbors, right? So those trees, we're talking about evergreens or, you know, whatever, they will, they either are or will high enough to block the visual impact of those buses going up and down the driveway. But we're only doing it for the neighbors, correct?
Yes, it's, right. And I'm just putting little lines here. This is Google Earth, it's imprecise, but, so right now you can see the driveway and the width on this, maybe you can see it or can't see it. 26 feet wide is going to carry it and make it much wider than it is now. In doing so, it's taking out trees along this area. And so the question is, on either side of this extended driveway, is there still sufficient planting to buffer views of buses, vehicles, whatever's happening along the drive from the adjoiners? You know, just looking at this aerial, it looks like, you know, they may have some evergreens in here because this seems to be almost off leaf. This individual here, where the pool is, may not have the same screening. So I think it's up to the applicant to come up with the plan as to how they can widen the road and still buffer the views of the buses coming in and out, et cetera, from the adjoiners.
I'm just thinking, you know, that lot slopes down significantly.
This does, yes, it goes downhill.
And so if any trees are planted at the bottom, towards the bottom of that lot, then they're going to block that side of the driveway.
If there are trees, well, the trees, though, would be located on the joiner's property, you're saying, or no?
No, well, whatever it would take, but what I'm saying is that with that slope, that severe slope of that property, if you have at the bottom of that hill there trees that are blocking the view of the property, I don't know what the difference is between that and having the trees on the side of the driveway.
Right, but I think they're so narrow that there is no place to put them farther down the slope,
Okay.
unless I'm misunderstanding.
It's not on the lot.
Let me, I think what we will do for now is, we will have our landscape architect look at this.
Okay,
We'll see what they will come up as proposed planting. If Karen will not agree to that and say it will die, it will be an option for you to accept if my landscape architect comes up with something. If not, what?
sorry, we're getting some,
If not, hopefully you will agree to a fence, but we'll do our best. That's it.
okay.
And I think too, if, you know, your landscape architect wants to reach out to Karen, talk it out before, you know, as they are coming up with that plan, I'm sure she would, you know, talk, you know, to
Unless
give some
you want-
initial comments.
Unless she wants, I think she says that she likes dead trees planted, so maybe that will be an option, so.
Likes dead trees planted?
That was the discussion on the site. I said that as a joke, and she said, "It's yeah, that makes sense." She has seen that painted red trees. So
Okay.
anyway, I think with that, I want to go to that discussion about I wanted that John should be able to leave.
Are we okay with landscaping right now?
So basically, to summarize, we will have the tree survey updated, have the amount of trees that's being removed, proposing that we feel necessary that needs to, like Ashley said, pointing out where we have 25 feet of vegetation, but we're not going to do a full accounting for every tree on the property to verify, because that's going to be a lot of
And no,
time.
but
But we will add
it's within
some-
the disturbance areas.
We'll add more pictures to the areas where, the parking areas, but if it's being affected, then we'll notify that area is being affected, so we'll need to have that updated in the landscaping. Along the driveway, we'll see what our landscape architect will come up with the spacing that we have. Might be they will determine some trees that can stay, that they feel that will not be affected, together with some additional landscaping, and we'll go from there. Would that make sense to the board?
Well, Jeff?
And just along with that, for clarity's sake, one of the things in Ashley's communication talked about, so if there's going to be tree removal, and yes, you may replace some of those, but you may not replace all of those. If you're not replacing all of those on a one-to-one basis, our tree preservation provides for other options. So for any trees that aren't going to be replaced, either whether it's along the driveway, elsewhere on the property, we need to know what's going to be the solution there. Is it going to be, the $750 fee per tree, or what option you're going to go with there?
So might be the town will make some money. We'll see.
No, but, you
Well,
can propose what you want, but I think from our perspective, it's really about first taking care of mitigating visual effects, and then from there, if it's a fee, then it's
That's going to be
different.
the base of our proposal. So.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, I think one of the things that you point out is, it's a sizable piece of property, and you have an opportunity. It's not a tremendous amount of trees that it sounds like you're looking to take down. You may have an opportunity on that property to add them in other places where it provides additional mitigation, like along that green fence at the
Correct.
property at the bottom
At
of
the
the
bottom.
slope. And,
Yeah, you're right.
there's all kinds of options there.
100%.
We just need to know what you ultimately decide,
Okay.
how you want to handle that.
Right. Can we take a 2 to 5 minute break before we move on? Is that all right? Okay. We'll be back. I just know that if that was a discussion on landscaping, this may go on for a more extended time period, so I just wanted to take a quick break. All right, Ashley, where are you with your comments?
I think, I mean, going through your letter, Ashley, I mean, I think the issues, I mean, you're saying you're okay with the architecture.
I'm not sure, I don't think it's the time now to discuss the architectural. We have time that probably for the next meeting. I don't think it's anything significant. If you want to take a quick look on that, for now, we can discuss that further. Basically, we're adding a ramp in the front, a ramp to the basement, and a staircase up, but basically the building stays the same, and adding lighting. So I'm not sure if we want to get into that tonight, because we have other major issues to address. I don't think that's going to change the character or anything major.
I mean, it's really more of submitting the architectural details for all of those improvements, colors, materials, all that.
There's no
for-
color materials. It's basically wooden, natural wood stairs. That's it. There's nothing there, nothing more, nothing less. It's not like we're doing any siding or any.
So it's just, so then,
And then the ramp to the basement is concrete.
so the board has architectural review. I mean, I know you're familiar with that
So I will
from the
add
last
some-
one.
I will add some
Say
notes.
a note what materials
I
it
will
is,
add
what
some-
color.
Some more detailed notes based on the
Yeah.
previous
I,
job.
I think also
I think
there
the
were
lighting
like,
specs and the signage was another one I think that was missing.
you had, I think if I recall, you had a deck, or you had a door that was boarded up because it was no longer going out onto a deck. Was that the case? Do you recall this in the back,
Yes.
right? So, no, but so, are you closing off the door? Are
I
you
need to
doing the same siding? That's the kind of
I
detail.
need to check on that. It's in the back of the building. I don't think you have a big, if it's going to be closed off, it will be the same siding as there is now in the building. Okay, we'll look into that details.
Yeah, so just to put the details
So,
on
Let me
any,
try to detail that much more based on the previous application, and we'll go through that. I don't think we need to discuss that now,
okay.
it's getting late. What else
I think just,
to get to the manual standards?
okay. Yes, the waiver, some of the waiver requests we had, this is on? Hello? The waiver request we had, I guess we were a little confused because we said that I thought we had in a footnote, we explained that why the manual doesn't apply. I mean, we had sort of a lengthy discussion why the manual doesn't apply. The manual planning standards only applies to public schools, not private schools. You're saying that the requirements are not appropriate, and then we did have in a footnote in our letter just some examples. I mean, you can't be asking us to go through the
No, we
manual
made it
planning standards is quite thick.
No,
So
we
have
had
us
made
go
that
through
clear at the
every-
last meeting. Did you have did you provide examples? I didn't recall seeing.
Yes, in our footnote 3, for example, we said the manual requires main cars and stair enclosures to be 36 inches, but the building code, which applies to private schools, requires each door opening provide a minimum of 32 inches. And we gave another example, the manual requires main corridors to have a minimum clear width without lockers of 8 feet, whereas the building code requires minimum corridors to be 44 inches. Again.
Where are you reading from this? I'm not,
This is in my letter.
What
of
page?
September 30th, page 6, footnote 3.
oh, okay.
Again, I mean, we tried giving some examples of, the differences. Again, to have us go through each and every requirement of the manual, it seems sort of onerous. John, do you want to speak to this?
And again, that's not anything that was requested. It was really this board wanted to know
Sure.
why you feel it's not appropriate.
Sure,
It's great if you could
John Till,
elaborate on that.
architect. So, I've had experience certainly with private schools as well as public schools. So the manual of standards is specifically designed, as Dan had mentioned, for a superintendent of a school district, public school district, as guidelines on how to proceed with the planning and acquisition of engineers and architects and planning and standards for a public school. And it's specifically designed for that. They do have very specific requirements because the normal process for a public school is that the state education department handles all of the site planning and they also handle the building construction and approvals. At no point does it circle through the building department and planning board at the local level. They have full control over that for public schools. Okay, so for private schools, it falls back into our building code with all the other buildings, like the building we're in here. So that governs the design, the requirements, the exit requirements, the life safety items. Those things are all covered in the building code, and that's something that as the applicant moves through this process, we get forwarded to the building department. And at that point, Ben Malandano and I go through a very detailed code review where we address all those internal exiting and life safety items on the plans before he issues a building permit. So the state education department in the manual of standards does that internally. They don't do that through the local building department. So when we're asking for this relief from this, we still handle all the building code requirements through the building department. We're just not a superintendent of schools doing a much larger project, which has heavier requirements. Simple things like the interior corridors of the building need to be 8 foot wide. Well, that doesn't really, the building code doesn't have that requirement for private schools. But the state education department over years has developed this standard.
They're saying into the mic, please.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
The state education department over the years has added these requirements because it works for public schools, because of the population and the amount of students that are in a typical public school. So there's many similarities, there's many crossovers when it comes to the building construction and the life safety items. Those things are all handled at the building department level as the applicant moves through this process privately.
John, keep the mic closer, you keep moving it when you talk.
My apologies. So we're looking for this relief from this particular manual because it's really set up for, again, the superintendent of a public school that works through this process of construction without the benefit of a local building department and a local planning board. So that's real. As we move through this process, even when we get to the building department, the building inspector wouldn't be looking at that particular code. They'd be looking at the New York State Building Code, which governs all private schools and all buildings in New York State. So that's why we're asking. We seem to, there's an ambiguity here as far as what code applies. We know the building code applies, but we also have these requirements from the state education department, which really don't make sense in a private school of this size. So that's why we're asking for relief from that particular code. And if you were to give us this relief, again, the building code still applies. All the life safety items of the building code still apply. They're under great scrutiny. After this board process is done, I do a very detailed report with the building inspector before he issues a building permit, and we go through all of the requirements that are needed based on the New York State Building Code, like he does for this building or any other building that goes under permit. So that's really to summarize, the difference between the two processes. And the more I look at, and I've dealt with the state education department as far as working through the manual of standards, even with Minor Woodbury School District, when we're adding a building on. We go through the state education department, they go through the manual of standards, and the manual of standards is an override to the main building code. And that's how they look at it and how they proceed through their process for public schools. We have the building code for private schools. So that's really the main difference. You're not missing anything from one to the other that as it pertains to life safety in the building. Did you have any other questions particularly on that I can help you with?
So the reason why this is, and I do understand that it doesn't apply to private schools, so the issue came up because the town's special use permit criteria holds private schools to this higher standard, and there's a specific waiver standard in order for this board to waive that, and that is whether it is not required in the public health, it's not required in the interest of the public health, safety, or general welfare, or inappropriate to a particular special use permit. So
And
if
I'm
it's-
not sure that it is a higher standard. What I'm trying to explain
Or a
here, that
different
it's a
standard.
different standard. So the building code has just as high of life safety items that need to be
Well-
achieved.
So I think
I
that's
guess I-
exactly what we'd like to know, because the two examples given here were, 8-foot wide corridors and doors with a minimum clear of 32 inches. Because private schools didn't have standards other than the building code, the idea was to have the public school standards apply to private schools and treat them the same.
There is.
Sorry, can I finish? So the special permit was written that way, so that there'd be standards for private schools. We, in fact, in the town of Monroe, have very large private schools. And I don't know if they're, designed to building code or if they're designed to public school.
So,
But
I was involved in all that schools.
so the point is, in coming up with the standard, the town created a special use permit that said that you should adhere to the same guidelines as a public school, which is a higher standard, but that the planning board has the ability to waive it. And in most of this narrative that I see is about providing a lot of case law that says why you don't have to meet it, our standard, rather than describing to us substantively in a more comprehensive way what their standards are and why they should be waived.
No,
And
but
giving two examples, to me, is not sufficient.
But I think as your counsel pointed out, the issue for a waiver is whether it's consistent with the public health, safety, and welfare. And John explained that this would be subject to the New York State Building Code, which would go to the public health, safety, and welfare.
And I haven't heard whether or not your building, which isn't going to meet the education department standards, does it in fact meet the building code for a place of public assembly?
It will meet the building code. Any requirements will be added.
You're saying it will be. Is there anything right now that does not comply with the ability for that school to be used
There is
for
some
that purpose? Are there any
building-
retrofits? Is there anything that needs to be done?
in the building code.
No.
And
From a
there's-
building code, well, from a building code perspective.
There is some adjustments that we need to do in the building in order to make it, because the conversion from the residential to the building code, there is a list of items. Everything is doable. But the list of items that the manual standards, before even looking deeper into the whole list, makes this basically, this whole building unfeasible. And I can tell you one thing, knowing all the other schools, all other private religious schools, I don't know private unreligious school, but all private religious schools are going to be under the same burden. I have commented that on the zoning, when the zoning law was adopted, and I think everyone will seek I know other schools that are coming up soon, they will also seek the same waiver because it doesn't work with the private schools.
Why doesn't it work for the private schools if a public school can be constructed in that
It
manner?
will probably be
Because a school is a school,
because it's
so what's the difference?
Because it's governed under the building code, there's a long list of items that if you want to spend our time and money to get that through the next couple of months, again.
No, I'm just
Let me tell you
asking.
something. I know.
Joel,
You
I'm
know-
just asking you.
Yep. I want to point out. One second. I want to point
Well,
out
if
one
we want
thing.
to filibuster.
I want to point out one thing. I'm here long enough, working with the board and every application, trying to work it out the best possible. This application, I believe, it comes from the supervisor all the way down. They trying to stop this, will not let it go.
That is inappropriate.
And it's
That
not-
is inappropriate.
I have enough proof on that.
No, that's
with that,
inappropriate.
we
And
will-
that's not, and that doesn't concern
We'll
our
go
planning
through
board.
every angle,
That doesn't concern our planning board.
that's it. Now
So
we can go
again,
back to the
if that's what I was waiting for, I think it was inappropriate. My question is, some key, and maybe what would help you is if I gave some parameters of how I'd like to have a comparison. So for example, is the occupancy that would be allowed just by the building code different than what would be allowed for a public school? You know, in terms of a square footage basis.
I think
What are
if
the
you-
comparisons and what's the order of magnitude?
I think if you want to give a comparators, the comparator should go to the public health, safety, and welfare, which is the waiver standard. So again, if there's, you know, I don't see it. I mean,
I'm
again,
working off of our special permit standard, so I want to
and
understand,
what I'm pointing
and
out
if,
is the point, the special permit standards in your code may be illegal.
So again, this,
you know what we'll do? We'll hire our own architect, and we'll get them to take a look and give us a comparison then. That's another option.
so if I could just touch on that,
Okay.
as I had noted in my letter, it's not up for this board to address the legality of the zoning provision that the applicant disagrees with, but again, the town has broad police powers when it comes to zoning. So my question, I guess, for perhaps Mr. Till could answer that, is whether, because you can't, Dan, as you know, just like a zoning board can't always grant a variance in a way that it would be effectively rewriting the code, this board can't, you know, you can't be saying to this board, you're always going to have to grant a waiver because this other body of law, the building code, is what should apply in these circumstances, because that would render this provision meaningless, and no code provision could be rendered meaningless. It has to be applied equally. So I think the question I have here is perhaps whether it would be, is there a circumstance where there'd be perhaps a larger private school that it would make sense to have these, you know, that could satisfy these standards? Because to say it's not required in the public, or to say you meet the waiver standard just because the building code is what should apply based on what the manual says, that's not really going to the heart of the site plan criteria standard, and that's really what the board's looking for. So if it is, as the chairwoman was saying, if those manual standards are because they're a much larger occupancy than this school, or there's other distinguishing factors as to why they wouldn't, you know, be appropriate or required here, that's the type of, and it doesn't have to, you know, be I don't think, it's not going through every single provision in the code. It's really, this board doesn't know what those parameters are, what type of intensity of a school use.
The standard for the waiver is public health, safety, and welfare, which is consistent with. If the standard for the waiver is the public health, safety, and welfare, do you need something from John saying that the New York State Building Code is intended to protect the public health, safety, and welfare? Because again, this would be subject to the New York State Building Code. That'll implement it. You're not giving up anything on the public health, safety, and welfare by waiving this provision. And I'm just trying to think of a simple way to get this, you know, to address this provision.
I think Bonnie started to put out a list. Maybe if that's something helpful, do you want to put the list on what you want
and
to see?
how they compare. So if I were to go through it, or if
So-
we get our architect to go through it,
So
just
you
some
have the
key standards, like occupancy,
What else?
acreage, things like that. How do they compare?
So what is the list? Occupancy, acreage?
Well, I'd have to develop it.
Oh, okay.
I'd have to look at the manual and see how they compare.
But probably under, you can use the town attorney and that kind of stuff, because
That's it, yeah.
Well, specific, you know, you cited two particular examples in your footnote. And so I'm curious, and John or maybe Joel, you can help me understand this because I'm trying to. And I think it goes to public safety and health and welfare, which is, so you use an example of manual requires main corridors and stair enclosures have at least two 36-inch doors. The building code requires that each door opening provide a minimum clear of 32 inches. I assume that also implies that it doesn't require two doors, that one door is acceptable. So in a private school situation, you use this building as a comparison, would all the provisions of the ADA be applicable? Because a 32-inch door wouldn't meet ADA, a 36-inch door would. So again, I'm just trying to figure out, I'm trying to understand, you know, where this middle ground is, because I get your example of when Monroe Woodbury is building a new high school, that it's not under the purview of the town of Woodbury where the property is being developed and built. It all goes back to the state.
State
And that's
education
not the way
department.
it works in a private school situation, if I'm following the information correctly.
Yes.
So, does the ADA apply to a private school? Does it apply to this private school, all private schools, as part of, New York State building standards?
So Jeff, just to add to that, so these would normally go to the state education department, and they have a facilities group that would review plans for a school to meet those standards.
For a public school?
For a public school.
Okay.
So for a private school, the special use permit anticipated that, and by the way, isn't our special use permit for private and for public schools? So it's regardless of the school, the idea, I'm sorry.
1 second, I need to
We-
leave. I have
oh.
something, I need to be somewhere 10
Okay.
o'clock. So I hope they will be able to finish up something reasonable for me, because we need to get this done in a reasonable way, and appreciate the board's help on that. Thank you.
So just to answer your question, or to shed light on it at the very least, the Manual of Standards has one standard for a certain size school. That, for instance, the 6-foot wide door, the double doors, okay? That they're anticipating that, a typical school has hundreds and hundreds of students going through those corridors. Whereas they don't have an exception for the smaller school. So the smaller private school has to rely on only the building code, because a smaller school wouldn't have 8-foot wide corridors in a smaller school. The building code says you can have smaller corridors because you have a lower occupancy load. It's similar to the door question. If you have a double door system, many hundreds of people can go through that door. If you have a smaller occupancy load, you don't need as many or as wide or as many doors. And it's a factor of the occupancy load, which designs that in the building code. The state education department, they don't have those parameters because they don't have those issues, because they don't build smaller schools. They build the school the way they've been building it for 60 years. Certain size schools get certain size doorways and certain size hallways, but private schools typically have a smaller occupancy load, and that's where the building code comes into play. And it does meet the requirements of the building code to the full satisfaction of the building inspector. So but it gives us other options. There are no other options in the manual. So if we say that we have to meet the standards of the manual, it doesn't apply to the smaller buildings. So that
It's a scalability issue.
Yeah,
The building
yeah,
code allows for that in New York State.
Yeah, and if you look through
The
some of the
planning-
examples-
The planning manual for public schools does not.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Because they don't need to.
Who's going to build a
Because they
very
don't need-
small
because
public
they
school?
don't need to.
Right.
Yeah, they don't build private schools, and they don't build smaller schools. They build high schools and middle schools and elementary schools for a certain level of population.
So I'm not sure that there aren't smaller schools in rural areas. I'm not sure. It's a question I have. And I think the other question is, because you're touching upon it, does the design standards manual itself have waivers? And I don't know whether it does or not. That's just a question. So in the same way that you're asking us to waive a special permit requirement that says, please meet the public school standards, does the manual itself that public schools are supposed to follow, does it have waiver provisions?
Sure. So in a situation like that, we would, if I were designing a building for a public school or an addition onto a public school, and I didn't meet the manual of standard for some other reason, that would have to be reviewed by the state education department, and their architects and engineers would make that determination. And it's usually a face-to-face review. You discuss the ideas and the requirements, and they can make that determination, like a building inspector would do for a private school. they're the building inspectors for the public schools.
Okay.
So
That-
there's and those areas, there would have to be a discussion and a back and forth to figure that out. But that's at the discretion of the state education department for those things. They wouldn't even look at our project because it's a public school. They have no.
They have no jurisdiction, right.
Interest in looking at a private school whatsoever. They'd say, call your building inspector in the
Right.
town.
So-
And he'll do the review.
The other thing I wanted to point out, and what I was starting to say, is that our special use permit doesn't say you need a special use permit for a private school. You need a special use permit whether it's a public or a private school. And so we were holding schools to the same standard, the standard being
So a
state
private-
education department.
So my understanding of a public school is they'll never come to this board. They have their own jurisdiction. It overrides local village, local towns. So they don't even go to the building department when they build a school. I've built additions for Monroe Woodbury. We never talk to the town of Woodbury whatsoever when we put additions onto the building. It's governed only by the state. They'll do a cursory letter to the building department stating that they're about to build a school, but there's zero oversight from the local planning board and local building department. The only approvals and C of Os for the school district comes from state education department. So there is no local process for a planning board.
Yeah,
For public schools, Private schools, of course, there are, because that falls under the building code and local zoning. Just to clarify that process.
I hear
So-
what you're saying.
So
I would have to look into that only because of some
Just giving you my understanding
schools that I've been
of the
involved with,
process. Yeah.
school districts.
For instance, if Monroe Woodbury School District came to me and said, we're putting an expansion onto North Main Street School, that would go through the state education department. They may notify the building department, but there's no approval needed from the building department to do the construction as part of the process. But that's the state. That's how they run they govern all the public schools in New York State, construction, occupancy, and that's what this manual was set up for.
Right.
And it says
To be a
right in the
standard for all schools in New
Right,
York.
and it says right in the front of the manual, you'll see this manual was developed for superintendents to guide them through the process. And in a private school system, they don't have that guidance. It's private construction. They're not building it with public money. It's a different process for private schools than it is for public schools. So that's why you have this, so that's why there's a lot of some areas that cross over and are similar, and some areas where it's not similar to the building code.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would have to look into that. I know education law, I believe state education law touches on, whether they're exempt or things like that, but I would have to look into that.
Thank you. So, Ashley, what other comments did you have? While you're there, I had a question. The septic abandonment. Larry, you had that the septic tank gets filled. Does anything happen with the tile field, or you leave the tile field in place?
That'll stay in place.
And that's allowed? Or there's
Correct.
no issue with that?
Yeah.
Or no health, I should say no health department standard for that?
Correct.
Having to remove it, okay. So you don't have to
Actually,
fill it or do anything as far as the tile field?
The filling of the septic tank was a requirement from DPW, correct?
Yeah, from right, Orange County. Yep.
Right.
Okay. I didn't see a detail or a standard or whether it was even required. So they talked about filling the septic.
I only
Tank.
noticed it because Larry had responded to it. I hadn't seen the comments from the county, but Larry had responded that they provided a detail to fill the septic tank.
Okay.
Correct. Yep.
Is that the permit that Joel was referring to?
Well, the permit was for the construction of the sewer, tie into the sewer.
Okay.
I
But
don't-
one of
yeah.
their comments in their review was the abandonment of the septic tank.
As long as we're talking about tanks, are there any underground oil tanks? For
Not to my
heating?
knowledge, I
Yes, there
believe
is.
it's all on gas.
I believe there is. In the front next to the well, there was
Was
a,
there?
there was a fill and a vent pipe for oil. And I don't believe there's any space below the garage floor, that was adjacent to. So I have to assume that there isn't a buried oil tank.
All right, we'll look into it.
We talked about the silt, I'm just looking at my own notes. We talked about the silt fence, talked about the septic tank abandonment. You were referring to the ADA slope on the ramp. Light locations, you're gonna show them to be removed, and if there are any that need to be added, to include those. We talked about the silt fence, the record owner and applicant you mentioned had to be changed. We talked about the SWIP and the need for one. And number of trips. I wanted to talked about, I think the fence design is a question mark, but I don't think that has to be tackled tonight. Oh, there's a note, no vehicles related to the intended use will be parking on site. Did you mean no vehicles unrelated to the intended use will be parking on site? Or what did you mean, no vehicles related to the intended use will be parking on site? That there'll be absolutely no vehicles parking here?
Well, with the exception of, there were going to be, from the teachers or any of the school buses, there were the 5 spaces for, office personnel.
So there will be vehicles related to the intended use parking on the site?
Yes.
So I wasn't sure if your note was actually meant to say, but no one else can park here other than people who are,
Well, it was more intended to try to make the point that there wasn't going to be parking for teachers, the school buses, et cetera. But yes, there will be some, so we'll revise that note.
okay. Talked about the bat note.
As we were talking about parking, one of the comments I had was about the parking calculation, and I believe it has to be 15. I know you're only proposing 5, and I understand that you're asking for the rest to be land banked, but based on the number of employees, which is 15, it needs to be 15, and then you'd have to show, you're showing 8 land banked, you'll have to show 2 additional.
10.
I'm sorry. Yeah, 2, right, they're showing?
They're showing 10.
Oh, they are showing, okay, so that number's right, it's just the, I think it's the okay, so it's just the calculation on the plan that needs to be changed.
And under the parking notes, on the first page, you have per zoning, a total of 13 parking spaces is required, 10 for teachers, 3 for offices, persons associated with the school arrive by bus, no parking required. I would say no parking proposed, because there is a requirement for parking. You're asking to construct less than what's required.
That would be per zoning, a total of 15 parking spaces is required, 10 for teacher and 5 for offices. And then the second bullet would say no parking proposed. Or land bar, and you have the.
And/or land banked,
Yeah, which
something
you
to
do
that effect.
have, but where it says that 8 future spaces are shown, that should say 10 future spaces are shown.
The bus template, is that the largest bus, or is that the bus that's proposed? You have, you're showing a bus template dimension, I think the full length of the bus is, you have 35.8 feet, and you have the S bus 36.
Yes, I mean, that's the bus that they told us that they utilize on site to bring the students back and forth, but we'll verify that that is the actual size.
And that's the maximum bus size they'll have?
And the maximum bus size that they'll have on site, correct?
Okay. So, related to that, the cul-de-sac design, can it handle anything larger than this, or this is what that cul-de-sac design can handle as a max?
Well, the cul-de-sac design is for the fire truck.
Right,
So
true.
I'd like to think it can handle the bus turnaround if it's going to handle the fire trucks.
What,
But
did
we'll
they,
show, we'll show the bus in there also, if you like.
did they, when they gave you the, or when they were, I can't recall in the letter, when they gave you the, provide us the turnaround area, did they give you the actual dimension and the typical fire truck, or did they just
No,
say,
that's out
put
of
in a
the-
cul-de-sac?
That's from the code. It's the code.
It is a code, okay.
As far as that bus turning template, I know the board had requested that it be shown on the actual site plan.
Okay.
I
Right,
didn't see that that
within-
had been done.
Within the actual cul-de-sac, not just the detail. Not just a template, but show it in the, how it can maneuver in the cul-de-sac. With regard to, I'm just looking at some of your details, the proposed dumpster refuse enclosure, you have split face block. So just when we get to architecturals, I don't know what color that would be, but how does it match up with the house? And I presume the house is just staying the same color, whatever it is. White, okay. So, and then you're gonna have a wooden doors then to it. Were those gonna be natural, or are we gonna paint those? They'll be white?
We can clarify that.
Okay.
He's talking about the house.
And with the architecture, I know we discussed this before about adding the materials, colors and all that, but also the signage. I do want to remind you to put that on. I believe you had indicated there's signage on the site plan, but there needs to be the details for that.
On the first page, where you have the meets and bounds of the lot, you have meets and bounds, and then you have deed line per liber 4719, page 1063. Does that meet up with, or does it affect the adjoiner in any way? The Strauss lot?
No, I don't believe so, but I'll verify with our survey department.
Okay.
It was just a reference. But there's a deed line shown.
So when we go to approve this, it was more of a question as to, if we show this, does it actually show that it's going to go onto the adjoining lot, or is it just the two lines are actually on your lot, it's just one is farther in than the other, so,
I'll get it straightened out.
thanks. Those are my questions for now. Yes, please.
I would just like a clarification around, well, it's something that was mentioned in John's letter and again referenced in yours, Dan. In relation to the fire, I guess, department comments, it should also be noted that the building will be fire sprinklered and will have an FDC fire department connection adjacent to the fire apparatus location. And what I'm really asking, I think, gets to water use. So I'm not really sure if there's a question for John or Larry. When we talked about the fire sprinklers, what I remember Joel explaining to us is there'll be a tank that provides water for the sprinklers, and I'm wondering where the water for the fire department connection comes from. Would it be that same tank? Does it feed off of the well? And if it feeds off of the well, does the well testing provide covering for that need as well?
So my understanding of when the fire apparatus pulls up to the site, it's a tanker truck. It brings its own water.
Okay.
And it hooks it to the Siamese connection, which is the FDC, the fire department connection, and charges the sprinkler system where it's going off at the time. It's the first line of defense to a fire. If it's fully involved, then it's too late. But if it's at a certain point where the sprinkler system is still activated, then they take their tanker truck, tie it to the fire department connection, and pump the water through. So
Oh,
that's
this
the-
is, so
that's
it's the
first
reverse
line
of what I think
defense.
it is. It's not providing water to the fire department to provide, to fight the fire. It's where the fire department can provide additional water into the sprinkler system.
Into the sprinkler
to-
system. and
Okay, thank you.
Push the water through the building to charge the system.
Right.
In addition to the
What's
sprinkler
in the
system,
tank already.
which is truly the first line of defense. The second line would be the fire department adding water to the system.
Thank you.
And that's typically their own pumper truck that does that.
You want me to go through the rest of my comments? I mean,
Yes.
okay.
Jeff, are you?
Yeah.
Okay, why don't we go back to you, Ashley?
So hydrogeology, you have the well testing now, correct?
We just got that, yes.
Sewer district, issue if they're not in the MUDNA. We talked about the limits of disturbance, we talked about the fire access, talked about architecture, site distance, and whether there's enough, I think. Did you talk about site distance in your memo?
I didn't.
That's something that, the engineer has to confirm that the adequate site distance based on what was provided. We talked about the parking, the building stories. So I see that you did add that 2.5 stories in there. I had just referred to the definitions under the code and just asked that you confirm that that was what you were using to make that calculation. The narrative, I did summarize in my letter what the parameters of the proposed school are based on both narratives where there were some inconsistencies. So if there's anything in there that's, incorrect, please let us know. Related to that, the buses, I know you said 4 buses, each doing a morning and pickup and a afternoon drop-off. So would that be a total of 16 trips, 8 in the morning, 8 in the afternoon, or a total of 8 altogether?
How are you getting 16? I'm not
So
getting.
if you're doing 4 that are doing, 4 going into the property to drop kids off and then leaving the property, that's 8 in the morning. And then in the afternoon, 4 coming in to pick up the kids and then leaving with the kids, that's 8 in the afternoon. So and if you need to get back, on that, I just didn't, it wasn't.
No, I mean, I think you're recalculating it using a different metric. I mean, I think what we said was accurate. It's 4 buses in, 4 buses in the morning, 4 buses in the afternoon. You're doubling it, saying 1 in, 1 out. I mean, either way.
It was just,
That's how trips are,
Sorry?
that's how trips are calculated.
Right, I mean, either way, it's a negligible impact, but
it would be,
Talking to the mic.
okay, so 4 round trips, I guess you could say, but 2 in, 2 out. Asked about, I know you talked about food delivery and what type of, if there's going to be any type of special vehicle that are doing food deliveries or any other type of deliveries, just, if there's going to be something frequently happening there, just to identify that as well. We talked about the waivers, obviously the engineering comments, and as far as seeker's concerned, we talked about at the board, you can assume lead agency status this evening. If you wanted to entertain a motion to do that. I know you would need the well testing results to make a determination of significance. I don't know if you wanted to look at the short EAF, if there's anything else you wanted to ask outside of what has already been discussed in order to help you for purposes of seeker.
Quick question, as I'm flipping through and looking at the renderings for the egress from the back of the building, that upper level, associated with this type of assembly and for egress, are wood-treated lumber allowed? Okay. That's, the code allows that? Okay. Okay. So it's all scaled to the building?
as the building grows and the occupancy loads grow, the construction type might change based on the allowable square footage of construction for that particular construction type. So in our case, wood frame construction is allowed for this size, for this size building.
When, with regard to the code and the building code standards for this type of occupancy, because you just mentioned as the building grows and as the occupancy grows, is it building or occupancy or combination?
A combination, so the square footage of the footprint of the building is what determines the construction type. So, and the construction type gets more restrictive, the more protective, the larger the building gets. So the building code permits a school to be built out of wood frame construction up until a certain square footage. Then if you sprinkler the building, that almost doubles. And if you go further than that, you have to change your construction type to something more non-combustible or fire rated as you get bigger and bigger, more into the 60,000 square foot range or 40,000 square foot range. But when you're down at the range that we're at, it's permitted to be, any construction material is permitted. So you could mix wood and masonry, or it could just be wood.
Is there a occupancy at which the construction has to change? Like if you go to 200, 300, 400, 500, or is it more, as the structure increases, it means the occupancy itself can increase?
Yeah, good question. So basically, as the square footage increases, the occupancy calculations increase. So they work together as you go. There's only so many people you can fit into a room according to the code.
Right.
And that's the occupancy load. So if the building's only this big, you can only fit so many people in it based on the requirements of the code. If it doubles, you can double the occupancy load. If it triples, you can double it. And the building code responds to that by, the larger the building, the safer it's supposed to be. Larger buildings become masonry and steel and other requirements. So in our particular case, for the smaller building footprint, we're in the wood-framed, allowable wood-framed construction.
Do you know what the cutoff is in size in terms of where you go up kind of to the next level?
Yeah, there's many factors that play into that. One is the square footage based on construction type, and then whether the building is sprinklered, and whether the building has fire department access, as we're talking about, fire apparatus roads. So all these things come into consideration based on the square footage of the building. The way the building code works is that the more safety requirements that you have in the building, the bigger you can make the building. They give you
At that particular material type?
Material, fire department access to all four sides versus one side. And these are things that as you get into, 40,000, 50,000, 60,000 square feet of buildings, that's when those things come into play. But the building does respect the fact that smaller buildings don't have those same requirements.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anthony, Lisa, any questions or comments?
I'm good.
Pat?
I'm good. I had questions about the fire, because I think that's the biggest threat, to this wood frame building, some sort of explosion or something like that. Just have to make sure there's proper egress so those kids can get out.
So right from the beginning, Joel and I were reviewing the building plans, and right from the beginning, we're proposing additional exits from each level to meet the building code requirements for life safety, egress, path of travel, distance through the building, and we've kind of pinpointed the items on the exterior of the building that would need site plan approval. Staircase, ADA ramps to the levels, those items are what we're proposing on the building currently. And the I don't know if you heard earlier, the building is fire sprinklered as well.
Yeah, I
Which
had
is
a-
truly our first line of
I
defense.
didn't know
to fire.
that, and that was a question I was going to ask.
Yes,
That
yes.
that would probably only cost about $15,000 for a building that size, so.
It's 8 times that amount. Only because we have to provide our own water source. So,
My house is probably bigger than that, and it's only cost me $15,000, so.
yeah. Are you on public water?
I am, yeah.
Yes.
Ashley or Sean, anything else? Okay, so with that then, since we can declare ourselves lead agency, I will make a motion that we, the Town of Monroe Planning Board, declare ourselves lead agency for this proposed action, which is an unlisted action.
I'll second that.
Noreen?
Anthony Vaccaro,
Aye.
Lisa McQuade,
Aye.
Bonnie Franson,
Aye.
Jeff Manson,
Aye.
Pat Shea.
Aye.
Okay. So I think that's what we can do this evening. There's some additional follow-up from the applicant in terms of submissions and details. And when that comes in, we'll get you on the next agenda.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we should, we'll continue seeker as far as the Part 2 EAF and getting through that. All right. One
Oh,
quick,
an administrative item,
yes.
I had mentioned earlier, so for the DG Realty project, the board wants the traffic to be reviewed by AKRF, who is
Yes.
doing the review for Monroe Commons. I don't know if they're doing any others right now, but I'd ask the board to entertain a motion to authorize the planning board chairwoman to sign the proposal for AKRF to perform traffic consulting services for the DG Realty Management subdivision application. And that's at the same rates that were approved for the Monroe Commons project.
Would someone make that motion?
I'll make that motion.
May I have a second?
I'll second.
Noreen?
Aye.
Aye.
Anthony Vaccaro,
Aye.
Lisa McQuade,
Aye.
Pat Shea.
All right, with that, the motion carries. And so the next thing we want to talk about is Ashley is willing to provide 1.5 credits of training for the board members, because we have to have 4 annually. Hopefully, you're all looking around and checking out courses that you could be taking. But Ashley will provide 1.5, and so I guess, should we schedule that for our November meeting? Do we have 2? Do we have 1
That's the November meeting.
in general?
Right, because
Right.
our first one is November 11th, which is Veterans Day, so the facility is closed for the holiday.
Okay,
So I've put out emails, basically I started them with you, Sean, and Ashley to see your availability. And the only person I heard back from is Ashley, that she's available the 10th only.
and the alternative is we just don't have the meeting.
Right, the alternative is no meeting because in November we would have the 11th. The town board has the 3rd and the 15th. Our second November one is the 16th. And then I have the ZBA on the 23rd. So I'm not quite sure where we would be able to squeeze in if nobody was available the 9th or 10th.
And what evening did you say, Ashley, you were available?
Ashley was available Wednesday the 10th.
The 10th. I can't. I know that.
Might be available that Monday, I just won't know until,
The 8th?
Bonnie and I are not on the 8th.
okay.
Sean and I are often in the same place. All right, so we'll have to take a look at schedules.
Okay.
I just have to look at my schedule. Was there any other evening?
Like I said, I don't know when, because the following Tuesday is your second meeting.
The 16th?
16th, and then the 23rd I have the ZBA, but then you have to watch when you have the 25th is Thanksgiving.
Yeah, I have a funny feeling we're gonna be stuck to one, so
Because
we
then
could.
you're gonna have to come up with submission dates.
So-
Unless you move it to the,
Well, do we have two in December, or we have having problems with December?
another two, the December is the 9th
And the 21st?
and the
Yeah.
21st.
So maybe then we just wait and hold off until one of those days to have our training, rather than November. If we only have one meeting in November because of the agenda, I think we just hold off till December.
Unless you do a Zoom call training.
Always do that a different,
I don't know.
on another evening.
Right. Either way, we need another evening, so.
I mean, if
So-
you move it to the first weekend of November, you're talking your submission date is, I believe it's the 28th. So that gives you 5 days to review the file if you move it to the first week in November.
That's a little tough because Sean has to review it and
Oh,
then
I
Ashley has
understand.
to
I
review
was
it.
thinking, I don't know what about later on, but then that would impact the submittal dates for December.
Yes.
So,
Yeah,
I mean, maybe you just see
And then we
what
have
comes
Thanksgiving.
in, and if it seems like it won't really fit all on one agenda, maybe then we try to
yeah.
add a second.
So let's for now, operate under the premise that we're gonna have one meeting. If it looks like we have some significant items that really require two, then we'll try and figure out if we need to do a second November meeting, once the in-by date comes around.
28th.
Okay, and then December, we'll plan on having two meetings, and we'll plan on one of them being an educational meeting. And, look, if there are items that we just can't fit that many on the agenda, then they have to wait till December. We try to be accommodating, but it's the holiday season, so it's a little tough. All right?
The training, I mean, we could always start earlier. if
That's
that
true,
works
too.
for-
Yeah, so if in November we need to start earlier, we could do that as well.
Or December. Whichever. As long as I know, yeah.
Yeah.
That I'll be able
we
to.
can
As long as
start
we have the ability to.
We can start the meetings earlier.
We
but
could
that's
start
up
it at
to-
6 if we need to maybe get another thing on the agenda. So, but I definitely think the training should probably happen in December. Ward, do you have anything quick you want to talk about? You're good? Okay, thank you.
Go home.
And I have to tell you, right now, I really don't feel like doing minutes. So unless you really feel strongly about doing minutes this evening, can we table it to Tuesday?
I would
that
make that motion.
We'll table it to Tuesday, we're good. I don't think we need a motion, so I think we'll just deal with our minutes after the Tuesday, since there'll be two items on the agenda, I believe.
No, you still have 3.
4.
Oh, so 4, what do we have on our agenda again?
Well, you'll have
Meadow
your,
Hill.
Meadow Hill, oh, possibly Yole.
TG
Palatine,
and Palatine.
and then you have possibly Yule Salts.
Okay, hopefully Yole will be very quick.
I will
Okay.
I will call Megan tomorrow morning,
Okay,
because she had said she was gonna get me something.
all right. With that then, is there anything else we need to bring up?
Just real quick, before we adjourn. So if you remember back, for those of you who were with the board, we did a project on foreign objects up on West Bombatia.
Yes.
They had their grand opening tonight.
Ah, we missed it. I need a libation now.
It's, I was up there, it was a nice event, and it was really kind of neat to see our projects come to fruition in that way,
Yeah.
and I just highly recommend you go by and see David's work and their work, and
I saw
check it out.
pictures,
Yeah.
interior. It was neat to
Yeah,
see that.
It came out very nice,
Great.
so.
Anybody else have anything? No? Okay. With that, I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting. May I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any nays, any abstentions? Motion carries. Have a good evening.